Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GBNews.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next few hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So coming up in the next hour, broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly will be joining me alongside author and campaigner for children in care, Chris Wilde. And in a few moments' time, we'll be going head-to-head in a clash of minds with Martin Daubney. He's a GB News contributor and a former MEP and former editor of the Labour list, Peter Edwards. But before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines.
Nana, thanks very much indeed. Let's bring you the top story, which is the UK has become the first European country to formally join the Indo-Pacific trade bloc, potentially creating access to over £12 trillion worth of global business. The Business and Trade Secretary, Kemi Badenoch, says the deal will bring British businesses a step closer to selling to a market of over 500 million people in Asia, with fewer barriers. Some everyday items from countries within the bloc, such as Australian UGG boots, for example, could become cheaper for consumers. It's estimated the agreement will come into effect towards the end of 2024. Nigel Huddleston, International Trade Minister, told GB News earlier the deal will help grow the UK economy.
We're talking about billions of pounds of additional economic activity right across the country. It will benefit every nation and region of the UK. It's not just about where we are now, but where this could go in the future as well, because we expect the membership of CPTPP to expand over the coming years. So I wouldn't be too obsessed with the current numbers. This is about the potential growth for the UK economy.
Well, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says that the trade deal is good, but there is more that needs to be done.
Any trade deal is good. I wouldn't call this one massive, but it's certainly not a plan for growth. And the problem is we've not had a plan for growth for 13 years under this government. We still haven't got a plan for growth. So, yes, look, a trade deal is always a step in the right direction, but this is not a plan for growth, and it's that failure to have a plan for growth that's left us in the economic mess that we're in.
Well, the Home Secretary has published her letter to Sir Keir Starmer claiming a Labour staffer met with Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion activists at private meetings. Suella Braverman claimed that internal memos from Just Stop Oil showed the MP Jess Morden met with the environmental groups to sell to them on how Labour is still driven by the environment. The Home Secretary called for the sacking of Miss Morden and for all office holders within the party to cut contact with, in her words, extremist groups. But Sir Keir Starmer has rebuffed the claim, saying none of his team are meeting with Just Stop Oil. Surgical procedures for more than 8,000 children have been cancelled in Scotland since 2019, according to the Scottish Liberal Democrats. They're describing the newly released data as a badge of shame for the SNP government. The Scottish Liberal Democrats say many operations were cancelled due to lack of staff or lack of equipment. A Scottish Government spokesperson has said the impact of COVID-19 on the normal day-to-day running of NHS hospitals could not be underestimated. Former soldiers could be called upon to join a reserve force in future crises. The Sunday Telegraph today reported it's part of a planned overhaul of the military, which would reduce the British Army to its smallest size since the Napoleonic Wars. Ministers are expected to defend the proposals, part of the long-awaited Defence Command paper, insisting the war in Ukraine shows how UK forces can become more agile. The army currently consists of more than 75,000 personnel, with the paper reporting the government will announce plans to cut it to 73,000. At least 4,000 people have had to be evacuated as a forest fire burns out of control in Spain as the heat wave across Europe rages. The fire in La Palma started in a wooded area on the island in the Canaries yesterday. 10 aerial units and 300 firefighters on the ground fought to bring the fire under control. At least 13 houses were completely destroyed as the fire advanced across the island. That's according to the president. The authorities say the fire has affected more than 114,000 acres of land. And firefighters are still battling a hotel fire in East Sussex over 18 hours after it began, with today's high winds making it even tougher fight. The emergency services were called to the Royal Albion Hotel, which has been reduced to a burnt-out shell in Brighton yesterday evening. East Sussex Fire and Rescue Service say no one has been injured, but people did have to be evacuated from nearby buildings because of an extremely challenging set of conditions. Significant smoke remains in the area around the hotel, and police have advised people to stay away. So, just an hour into the match, Novak Djokovic playing Carlos Alcaraz on centre court right now at the Wimbledon Men's Final Tennis Championships. The Prince and Princess of Wales bringing their children, Prince George and Princess Charlotte, to the Royal Box to watch the match. Novak Djokovic is trying to secure a record-equalling 8th Wimbledon title, currently held, incidentally, by Roger Federer. And meanwhile, in another match at Wimbledon, 17-year-old Henry Searle has become the first Briton to win the Wimbledon boys singles title since 1962. He beat his teammate, his opponent rather, Yaroslav Demin, 6-4, 6-4. Congratulations, Henry. You're with GB News. More news as it happens. Back to Nana Akua.
Thank you, Polly. It's fast approaching 7 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now, before we get stuck into our debates over the next hour, let me introduce you again to my panel. Joining me going head-to-head in a clash of minds, GB News contributor and former MEP Martin Daubney, also former Labourist editor Peter Edwards. Come on, Peter, smile. Crack a smile.
See you.
He always does that. Right, let's see what else is coming up today. The longest-serving Defence Minister since Winston Churchill, Ben Wallace, has confirmed that he'll be resigning as Defence Minister at the next Cabinet reshuffle and will step down as MP over the next election. We'll look at how big this is as a blow to Rishi Sunak. Then we'll be discussing inheritance tax. Rishi Sunak has doubled down on his pledge to scrap it if he wins the next general election. But will removing it be enough to get people voting Tory? Then green or gone. New developments in the UK are facing roadblocks unless local councils agree to implement net zero initiatives such as ULEZ or ultra low emission zones and low traffic neighbourhoods (LTNs). Finally, someone standing up to Just Stop Oil. We'll be debating Home Secretary Suella Braverman's stinging letter to Keir Starmer over Labour's support for their antics. And then, does Brexit Britain have something to celebrate? The UK has formally agreed to become the first European country to join a major Indo-Pacific trade bloc in what makes Britain's biggest trade deal ever since Brexit. That's on the way in the next hour. As ever, tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at GBNews. Right, so let's start with our first topic. Ben Wallace. Now, he's set to step down as Defence Secretary after 4 years at the helm. After 18 years in Parliament, he said it was just time to take a break from politics, serving under 3 prime ministers. Wallace has overseen Britain's withdrawal from Afghanistan, as well as the UK's role in the largest conflict in Europe since the Second World War. And it comes as more than 40 Tory MPs have announced that they are standing down at the next election. So, have we all lost hope? And is he jumping the gun? Is he jumping ship before, well, the ship sinks? Well, let's see what my panel make of that. Going head-to-head in a clash of minds, GB News contributor and former member of the European Parliament, Martin Daubney, and also Peter Edwards, former editor of the Labour List. Right, let's start with you, Peter Garnsting, as you've given me such a nice smile there. What do you think, then? What's your thoughts?
I think it's a cause for great concern, really. It's been in the pipeline the last few days, it would seem. I mean, we're so used to being party political, but actually Ben Wallace, he's competent, he seems to be a man of integrity, well, he is. He's a former soldier, so he's worthy of respect, and he's been in post for about 4 years. So he deserves to be treated with gratitude, but what does it say about the Sunak government when you've got the Defence Secretary quitting while Europe is at war? So I'm very worried about it, and obviously we've had some hopeless Defence Secretaries like Gavin Williamson, now Sir Gavin Williamson, and we've had some quite strong and competent ones like Ben Wallace. So I think we show gratitude to Ben Wallace, but very concerned about what comes next and what it says about the kind of collapsing Sunak government.
But he has made it clear that it's not to do with Sunak. He did say that it was simply because...
Yeah, there's other things going on.
I mean, he's been there for a long time.
He's been in post. He's a member of the Scottish Parliament. His seat's being abolished, and I think he's had changes in his personal life which affect us all. But clearly...
Has he?
Yeah, I believe so.
What do we know?
So I think he's separated, and that's sad in any event, and we wish them all well. But I go back to my point about, you know, the government has an awful lot of challenges and they're losing a key person, so that does say something about the leadership of the government.
Martin.
By any metric, Ben Wallace should have been the next NATO chief. He's got the CV, he's got the competence, he's got the grit, he's got the experience, but politics has overtaken him. Joe Biden has shafted him and instead has gone for Ursula von der Leyen as his top choice. Von der Leyen, a failed German defence minister, so incompetent. German troops once practiced with broomsticks because they ran out of weapons. Yet...
Where did you hear that?
That's a true story.
Really?
And I heard her maiden speech in Strasbourg when she made a pitch for European Commissioner President, and she was pledging a European army, a EU army, something we've been told by Nick Clegg was a dangerous fantasy. Now she's been put in pole position ahead of Wallace, clearly the best candidate on paper, and we're now seeing the globalist EU bloc moving into NATO. I think Ben Wallace just thought that's the final straw. And also, 5 billion quid of our taxpayers' money has gone to Ukraine at a time when we're cold, we're poor, we're hungry, and we're worrying about paying our mortgages and our rent and our food bills. And he said that Ukraine should be grateful. They should be grateful. And he said, we're not like Amazon Prime, we can just keep delivering weapons to Ukraine. And he's correct on that. His sin was speaking truth to power, being overtaken by a globalist puppet, which is what von der Leyen is. And I think he just thought quite reasonably, I've had enough of this. And he'll earn far more money outside of Parliament than he ever will inside of it. He's a fantastic talent, but the timing just wasn't right.
They're all giving up, aren't they? Because we're kind of fighting wars on three fronts, aren't we? We've got Europe, obviously, with regard to Ukraine. There's obviously the African side of things as well, and also China, as it would appear that we had some sort of information war going on. What do you think then, Peter, though? Because he's stepping down. We're in trouble. If you were to envisage somebody taking that post, who would you put in there?
Well, in reality, I think Rishi Sunak is what historians call a fag-end government, i.e. there have been several prime ministers, you know, so many reshuffles over 13 years that the current crop of Tory cabinet ministers is pretty weak, and you get that from left and right. So I'm not going to pick out a successor.
Well, with the Labour Party, I mean, if you're going to start picking out people, I mean, the Labour Party haven't got much to offer in terms of that.
I don't think that's fair. I think Labour Party, because it's been out of office, it has a chance to renew, doesn't it? And I think the Labour Party front bench looks stronger than it did in the Corbyn era, certainly. Look at Rachel Reeves, an economist, as Shadow Chancellor. Okay. But anyway, to go back to your point...
My question, though, to come back to my question, though, who would you put in there, in the Labour Party? If you were... Because presumably everyone thinks Labour are going to win. OK, so if we go with that, who would you put in then for the Labour Party? Who would be able to fill his shoes?
You can't even answer the question because there is such a paucity of talent on the front bench of the Labour Party. And if it's Emily Thornberry, who's a total avowed, over-the-top Europhile, you know, she would back the sorts of people like von der Leyen. She would put Britain in a back seat. She would take the knee to this movement of a European army. I think it's a worrying time ahead. David Lammy, as Foreign Secretary, he called Brexiteers fascists.
Oh, yes.
These are the sort of people that are going to be running the country, and they don't like what we stand for globally. They're ashamed of our past, and I think they will take a back seat in our future and allow the European Union bloc and Joe Biden to take control of this future. And I think Britain needs a strong, independent, challenging voice. Ben Wallace was there, and he's been squeezed out.
Can I answer that very briefly?
Well, would you? Yes, if you could.
So I think my hesitation with Labour is Labour shouldn't be dishing out jobs now. There's an election campaign to be fought. But just on this, you know, idea of an EU army, so we're not in the EU, first of all, and secondly, it's not Labour policy and it's not Tory policy to be part of it. So I think the idea of Britain being part of an EU army is just for the birds.
No, I'm not saying that.
But I'm just really thinking about who would sit in there for the Labour Party. We're trying to work, you know, you did criticise the Tory party, and I would give them a lot of criticism as well. Ben Wallace was a fabulous candidate to be doing the job he was doing. But if I look at the Labour Party, I can't think of one person who would be good at doing the job that he's doing, and I think we're in a very troubling place.
And in 2019, as somebody who knocked on thousands of doors, you know, in elections in the West Midlands, the East Midlands, Jeremy Corbyn, who was then the leader, was despised by anybody with anything to do with the armed forces because of his position on Northern Ireland and our historical past, ashamed of our role in World War II, ashamed of our global standing. This guy almost became Prime Minister, and he wants to get rid of Trident.
He's not a Labour Party candidate.
He's not now, but he was the person backed by Keir Starmer, backed by all of the front benches.
But you've mentioned Trident, and actually I was reading the other day that Labour were looking at unilateral disarmament as well. And this is concerning. If it,
that's not correct. That's not correct.
Well, correct me.
This is a very...
Because that's what I was reading.
No, it's not correct. It's a very sensitive issue in the Labour Party that has kind of been debated for half a century or more. Labour Party believes in disarmament because you don't want a world of nuclear weapons. But there's no way in the world they'd ever do it unilaterally, and that goes back 50 or 60 years to Bev and the Labour Party.
So you just said that
unilateral disarmament would obviously be so weak at a time when the dangers are greater than ever. So there would not be unilateral disarmament.
But you literally just said that what I was saying was wrong. But then you confirmed that that's what they stood for.
No, I didn't say that. So let me say it again.
We'll say it again so that I can hear that there's a difference.
Labour would like to have a world without nuclear weapons, and I'd imagine most of us would have. But the way to get there is not by unilaterally dropping the arms. Definitely not.
It's a dangerous fantasy, and it's a fantasy that plays straight into the arms of people like Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong-un, China. They're laughing at us. Now, we're kind of floundering about. What we need is strong leadership, not these philosophical debates in great times of global trouble.
Well, I don't agree with that at all. First of all, who ultimately thinks nuclear weapons are a good thing? It allows us to kill hundreds of thousands of people in a single day. But secondly, the Labour government, last time around, retained Trident. The Labour opposition is committed to retaining Trident.
If we lived in a world...
So there is no fantasy.
But if we lived in a world of kind of universal veganism, sandal wearing, you know, nobody had any weapons, then great, but we don't live in that world. We live in a world where the bad guys are armed to the teeth, and like it or not, we have to fight fire with fire. Nobody likes nuclear weapons,
okay, so
but they are a necessity. And you know, the concept of disarming unilaterally or even as a nation, which Corbyn wanted, is insanity.
But no one is suggesting that. It's certain Trident will be retained because the two parties that want to form the next government, Tory and Labour, have both committed to retaining Trident. Therefore, Trident will be retained.
Well, I mean, look, I was reading that was something they were supporting. I'm very pleased to hear if they are being serious about it, that they're not going to do that. I'm concerned that I can't think of another candidate who would actually do the job for the Labour Party, and neither can you, in place of Ben Wallace. And I think
it's really dangerous to start handing out jobs.
I don't think it's dangerous to start handing out jobs. It's good to try and envisage who would be in that place. I think Labour are very clever in that they don't want to say anything about anything, but I can see why. Because in 1983, when one of their people said that they wrote the longest suicide note in history, they're about to do it again every time they open their mouths. But if you just join me, welcome on board. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. On the way, finally, somebody standing up to Just Stop Oil. Home Secretary Suella Braverman, Suella Brave in name and nature, has written to Sir Keir Starmer exposing Labour's links with the eco-warriors. But now, let's check out some weather.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. July's relatively showery theme will be continuing over the next few days. Low pressure is gradually pushing its way off towards the north, so the winds will be easing, but for the time being, southern areas of Scotland down into north-east England could still see some blustery winds into the start of this evening. Some longer spells of rain for northern and western Scotland. Elsewhere, the thunderstorms and heavy showers we have seen will slowly be easing their way out, and underneath some of those clearer skies, temperatures will just drop down to around 11, 12 degrees Celsius overnight. Might drop into single figures in some rural spots as well. It does, though, mean that we'll see a decent amount of sunshine first thing on Monday morning, but we will then see those scattered showers developing once again as we head throughout the day, particularly for eastern, central, southeastern areas of England. Some of those could be quite heavy in nature, maybe with some thunderstorms again and some hail possible also. But there will be some sunshine in between those scattered showers, and with winds lighter compared to the weekend, it will just feel that bit warmer. Temperatures ranging between 18 and 23 degrees Celsius. For Tuesday, though, we have to watch as our next low pressure centre is going to push its way in from the west. So turning quite damp first thing on Tuesday morning for Northern Ireland, and that rain will then steadily progress its way into parts of northern Wales, northern England and then Scotland later on. The far south-east generally staying drier, but there is still the chance of further showers as we do head towards the rest of the week. Bye-bye.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Of course, this is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. Now, still to come, new developments in the UK are facing roadblocks unless local councils agree to implement net zero initiatives such as ULEZ, or the ultra-low emission zones, and LTN, low traffic neighbourhoods. But up next, are the Tories ready to scrap inheritance tax to bolster their votes in the next general election? And if so, is that enough to save them? That's on the way.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. If you've just tuned in, where have you been? It's fine. You've only missed about 20 minutes. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, earlier, we were discussing Ben Wallace, and this is what you've been saying. Ian says, hi, Nana. I believe Ben Wallace has been the government's plans, seen the government's plans for destroying our military capability. Yeah, I think that could be really, to be honest, that's probably it, isn't it? They're talking about cutting it all down and everything. Lyndon says, Ben Wallace leaving defence is tragic news. He's the only decent one in government at this moment in time. David says, Ben Wallace is a great loss, difficult to replace. So much disconnection at the top. We need a Prime Minister with a backbone. I think any one of us could do it, actually. I think I'll be up for it, actually, as it goes. But if you just join me, welcome. Let's move on to the next topic now. The UK has formally agreed to become the first European country to join a major Indo-Pacific trade bloc, the CPTP... Oh, I've got it. I've lost it now. Did I have it? Yeah. CPTPT. That's it, I think I've got it right. And it marks Britain's biggest trade deal since Brexit. Now, the deal could gain British businesses access to a market of over 500 million people with fewer barriers, but forecasts suggest placing the trade bloc's value at around about 1.6 billion a year. So joining me to discuss, Martin Daubney and also Peter Edwards. Martin, is this good news?
It's fantastic news for Britain, and one of the great myths of Brexit was that Brexiteers were little Englanders, parochial, with eyes only on our own horizon. In actual fact, we said all the time we should be looking beyond the limits of the EU. And by the way, the Remainer lies that the sky would fall and that locusts would sweep over the channel and destroy us, leaving only bones and Union flags is a complete myth. We know that imports and exports to the EU have increased in terms of monetary value with inflationary adjustments. It's basically the same. So we haven't lost any trade imports or exports with the EU. So this is a pure cherry on the cake, the kind of thing the EU said we couldn't have. And being a member of the EU means we couldn't have done this. So 1.8 billion per year boost to the economy is fantastic news. That would cover things like inheritance tax going away. So it's great news for Britain, and I think it's a real kind of one in the eye for the Remainers who told us that the world would end when we voted to leave the EU.
Well, what about the notion that people are saying it's only 0.08% GDP over 10 years is all it would do for us, so it's not such a big deal after all?
So what? It's in addition to unaffected trade in terms of monetary value with the EU. We were told that that would end overnight. It didn't, it hasn't, it's remained stable, and this is the pure bonus on top. It's time to rejoice.
Peter?
I've got to give credit to Martin because he's consistent and he's an upbeat advocate for his cause. But it's not the cherry on a cake. I think it's a cherry on a tiny rotting biscuit. The OBR has said the economy will be 4% smaller, and we've got back 0.1%. 0.1. I hope you're all celebrating at home.
It's actually 0.08, actually.
I was rounding.
Not quite one.
I was rounding up, to be kind.
But hang on, Peter. But that's... It is a bonus because think of the potential. 500 million people, or is it billion people? 500 million people, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of potential trading partners. Right now, what we perceive now, things can change. You've got people like America who are on the edges of it. China.
No deal with America.
No, hang on. They're on the edges. They're looking in, and China who are applying as we speak.
No deal with America.
Yeah, but China are applying as we speak.
Well, I think we might be talking later about how we're already in an information Cold War with China. So there's, I think we've all got very mixed feelings about closer economic ties, but of course we need to grow the economy. But go back to your point, seeing it as a positive, if you shrink by 4%, as we're forecast to, and then grow back by 0.08,
but
that's not terribly good news.
But the 4% shrink hasn't happened. Every Armageddon situation, apocalyptic scenario that Project Fear and the Remainers put forward hasn't happened. The facts are the facts, Peter. We have stability in terms of imports and exports with the EU. Smile all you like, the facts are on the table. And this is in addition to that. So we didn't lose our trading access or our status with the EU. That was a total lie. And this is a growing market, a younger market, a more vibrant market than the shrinking EU. And so as a consequence of that, this is a fantastic piece of trade. And it paves the way for other trade deals in the future. And that was what Brexit was always about, looking to the global arena, looking beyond the chains of the EU and being bright and optimistic and looking to the future, rather than, hey, we're stuck with the EU, which, by the way, is shrinking.
So has real terms trade with the rest of the world outside the EU risen or fallen since the vote?
The global market has been annihilated by COVID. Lockdowns that were willed on by all of the parties. And yet, no doubt, Remainers will pin that on Brexit. A comet could strike the Earth, and Remainers would blame Brexit.
Brexit is a comet striking the Earth.
The economic data is searched, I've just laid out, which you know we have more or less parity with before.
But I asked about the rest of the world. You didn't answer that question,
Listen,
old chap.
The apocalypse you predicted never occurred.
I have not
never
predicted
occurred.
any apocalypses.
This kind of deal is precisely the evidence we want, that people out there want to do business with the United Kingdom, which Project Fear, the Remainers told us would not happen. We'd be gravely damaged, we'd be holed below the water. That was the lie. The fact of the matter is, here we are, optimistic, with a multi-billion-pound deal. Isn't it funny how even you said, oh, God, it's only £1.8 billion. Well, I'll tell you what, take me to the bar after this and give us 1.8 billion quid, Peter.
I will happily take you out for a drink or a Marks & Spencer sandwich over the road. Other sandwiches are available. But look, let's go back to the economic figures, first of all, because I think that's the most important thing. So you've not answered my question about global trade.
Enlighten us.
We've not answered my question about global trade. And then finally...
Go on, enlighten us then.
The forecast... The 4% reduction is from the independent OBR. It's not from fromage eating liberal lefty Remainers in Islington. It's from the independent OBR.
The OBR, the people who keep getting predictions wrong all the time.
Yeah,
well,
those
all
guys,
economic.
Those ones. They keep making mistakes all the time.
They're the official forecaster.
They may well be, but they keep officially getting it wrong.
And they're officially pessimistic. They're continually pessimistic. The Bank of England were pessimistic about Brexit. They were wrong. You know, these figures are wrong. The reality, the figures on the table, Peter, show us we have parity with the EU. The disaster never came.
Well, again, Martin has not answered my question. It's up to him, because it's not my show, but Martin has not answered the question
you have
about trade with the rest of the world going up or down in real terms.
You have a trade prediction. So tell us what it is.
Well, answer the question. Go on, you answer it, Peter, seeing as we're not going to
It's gone down. I can't remember how much it is.
Oh, right.
So you're saying it's gone down, so not a full amount. You haven't got the specifics, but it's gone down a little bit. Or a lot? Is it a little bit or a lot?
I can't remember. I'll tell you next time.
Okay. Well, no point asking a question you don't know the answer of. He could have told you anything.
I've given the answer. But anyway, I think Martin is clinging to the figure about
the reality.
Real terms trade with the EU only. But we trade with the whole world, not just with the EU.
Yeah, but why are you so pessimistic? This is a wonderful opportunity. 500 million people.
We've got to make the best of it.
Well, listen, and the good thing is, hopefully, it will be done before the Conservatives, if they are voted out, and then Brexit will be, it'll be set in stone, which is good, because it does kind of stop us from now trying to get back into the EU.
So finally, very briefly, I think there's another myth. There are lots of myths, as Martin said, about Brexit, but there's a myth that people who offer critique are somehow either want another referendum or want to take us back in by the back door. The reality is, I accept the result. I don't think there'll be another referendum for 30, 40 years, possibly not in my lifetime. But it's bad for Britain, and there are independent stats.
A new trade deal that accesses at 500 million.
Brexit.
No. Listen, we've opened. Listen, to be honest with you, and I've got to be quick with this. But to be honest with you, I think a lot of people call people who voted for Brexit racist and so on and so forth. But to be honest, what we've done is close down a loophole that enabled mostly white people to come to this country without any real visa or anything like that. And we've opened it up to a global trade of people from all over the world. And I think that's a good thing.
Well, I've never called anyone racist for voting Brexit.
But a lot of people have said that, and to be honest, this is a really good thing, because it opens this country to the rest of the world, and that cannot be bad. If you just join me, welcome. This is GBNews on TV, online and on digital radio. Finally, someone standing up to Just Stop Oil. Home Secretary Swallow Braverman has written to Keir Starmer, exposing Labour's links with eco-warriors Just Stop Oil. And then we'll be discussing new developments in the UK. We're facing roadblocks unless local councils agree to implement net zero initiatives. That's all on the way after your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you. The top stories this hour. The UK has become the first European country to formally join the Indo-Pacific trade bloc, potentially creating access to £12 trillion worth of global business. Well, the Business and Trade Secretary, Kemi Badenoch, who's in Auckland, New Zealand, to sign the deal, says it'll bring British businesses a step closer to selling to a market of 500 million people plus, with fewer barriers. Some everyday items from countries within the bloc, such as Australian Ugg boots, for example, should become cheaper for consumers. It's estimated the agreement will come into effect towards the end of next year. The Home Secretary has published a letter to Keir Starmer claiming a Labour staffer met with Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion activists in private meetings. Suella Braverman claimed that internal memos from Just Stop Oil showed MP Jess Morden met with the environmental groups to sell them on how Labour is still driven by the environment. The Home Secretary's called for the sacking of Miss Morden. Just Stop Oil have tweeted a response claiming Suella Braverman is inventing stories to distract from the truth. Firefighters are still battling a hotel fire in East Sussex over 18 hours after it began, with today's high winds making it an even tougher fight. The emergency services were called to the Royal Albion Hotel, which has been reduced to a burnt-out shell in Brighton yesterday evening. East Sussex Fire and Rescue Service says no one's been injured, but people have had to be evacuated from nearby buildings. Significant smoke remains in the area around the hotel, and police have advised the public to stay away. More on all those stories by heading to our website, gbnews.com.
This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. On the way, the Tories could tear up inheritance tax as part of their manifesto. Plus, we'll be discussing loads of stuff with regard to Suella Braverman and Just Stop Oil. All of this after that.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 38 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. And now we're moving on. We're going head-to-head in a clash of minds. Joining me to do that, Martin Daubney, and also, I've forgotten your name, Peter. Peter Edwards. Right, listen, if you just tuned in, welcome. The Tories could tear up inheritance tax as part of its manifesto pledge in a push to win more votes before the next general election. Supporters argue the policy could be a game changer in the South, where Conservatives are defending constituencies vulnerable to the opposition, but the cut would set the Treasury back a whopping $7 billion a year. So will the removal of inheritance tax make you vote Tory? Let's see what my panel make of that. Joining me to do that, Martin Daubney, GB News contributor and former MEP, and Peter Edwards, he's a former editor of the Labour List. Peter, I might as well start with you. Inheritance tax.
Well, I don't think it will be abolished. And I know as a Labour person you'd expect me to kind of criticise a lot what the government does, but I honestly think this is completely balmy. I think it would be bad politics. I think it's desperation. IHT is paid by about 4% of people. So by definition, they're the most affluent families in the country. I think it would be...
I think a lot of people fall into it, though.
4%.
But you say that, but that's a very broad brush of a statistic. And I've heard a lot of people who are paying for it. A lot of people fall into it because of the threshold and because of the, obviously, inflation in the threshold, which is only at £325,000. If Labour got in, it would be about £120-something thousand. Well, that was a proposal on their manifesto.
No. The David Cameron government made quite a lot of changes to the IHT rules. So typically, and I won't run through it all, but it takes up to £1 million if you're married and you're leaving it to a direct family member, like a child or a grandchild. If you're giving it to someone else, that doesn't apply. But just to go back to Sunak, the reason why I think it's borderline madness and won't happen is exactly the reasons that we've been talking about. It's a tax cut for the richest, and I also think it opens up a big Labour attack line about a tax cut for the richest, and then the billionaire families who own a lot of retail and these kind of historic country houses who put family in trusts and put money in trust. And I think Labour will enjoy having an argument about that as well.
But part of you is slightly excluding your argument by saying that the rich people put their stuff in trust.
Nicely.
You're saying that they don't really get any money out of them anyway. So what's the point of it, Martin?
Oh no, they do.
Well, no. But also, what was your point? What was your point you're making then? If you're saying they're putting it in trust, you're saying that they're not actually paying the inheritance tax that they should be paying.
I'm saying something slightly different. I mean, there's a whole issue about the use of trusts by billionaire families, which the government has not gone after. But I think for Rishi Sunak, I think it would be a political own goal, and I think Labour would enjoy attacking him in the 12 months before the election for a tax cut for the richest.
It's not a tax cut for the richest, because the richest people, as you stated, have clever accountants and know how to shift their money around, and they know how to avoid inheritance tax. The people who are getting swept into this are property-rich people who aren't savvy, who aren't switched on and aren't cash-rich, because the threshold is sweeping more and more people in every year because property prices are going up because of inflationary measures. That's a consequence we've seen in France. This is a terribly cruel policy which affects pensioners without, a lot of money on paper, but their asset, their property is stripped away. And, in democracies, liberal democracies that people on the left aspire to be like, such as Canada, New Zealand, Australia and Norway, they have 0% inheritance tax because this money has been taxed entire life. Every single penny that you have at death has been taxed in every way possible throughout your entire life. It's an additional tax. It's a mean-spirited tax. And actually, I think it will be a vote winner in the blue wall. A lot of wavering Tories who are fed up with where the party's going. They might be thinking about going to Liberal Democrats or Greens. This will play straight not only into property owners' hands, but their children's hands. That's millions of people.
Well, and as I said earlier, the Labour Party, I have read parts of their proposal for inheritance tax, and it lowers the threshold by some £200,000, which would bring in more people who in the red wall into that bracket, which may well take more money, but then it might put off people who potentially would vote for them. Do you not see that is...
Well, until we have the Labour manifesto, we can't say for definite...
But that was one of their proposals, so that's what one of their proposals was.
Well, they're in proposal phase, obviously, because they're in the opposition. But to be honest, I think the chances of this actually being the Tory manifesto are close to zero, because I think one thing we all agree on, that it shores up the Tory core vote, right? But Rishi Sunak needs a lot more than that to survive. A core vote strategy wouldn't allow him to form a government.
I don't think it is about the core vote. This is a block of the vote that the Tories have always taken for granted. And now they can't. They can't take them for granted, and elections are about giveaways. Corbyn did the same with tuition fees, so did Nick Clegg. At least they know they can afford this. You know, Corbyn and Clegg hadn't even costed up tuition fees, but it's about giveaways come general election time. And if the Labour Party do start attacking this policy, I think that would be politically savvy by Sunak, because he will force Starmer into the open as a party of anti-aspiration, a party of anti-growth. If you work hard and do the right thing and build a property, even one house up, and the Labour Party's going to snatch it away from you, it's the fangs of socialism.
But Martin, I'm sorry,
come in for what you've earned.
I'm really sorry for interrupting, but it's not true, because the coalition changes...
You're not sorry.
No, I try and be polite to people and disagree. But the coalition changes were designed to mitigate what Martin has just set out. So the idea that a future government is going to come in and take away the ordinary family home is just for the birds.
Why is it? I mean, in terms of...
Because David Cameron increased the thresholds.
In terms of the proportion that's taken out of death, are you saying to me that the Labour Party wouldn't even contemplate increasing inheritance tax? That's an idea that's for the birds. Of course they will. They've talked about it. They won't do it before an election, because that would be a complete turn-off for the aspirational middle classes, which now, actually, the Labour Party is increasingly dependent upon. The working classes don't vote Labour anymore. So a lot of people who vote Labour are actually in this bracket of living in places like Oxford, Cambridge. This is actually a policy that will appeal to asset-rich people who live in metropolitan areas whose houses are worth a packet. And they're going to think, actually, this is quite tempting for me to go for. So it's a great idea to fly out there, even if it doesn't become policy. It still says, we are the party of aspiration, and if you oppose it, Keir Starmer, you're the party of grasping my assets at my point of death.
So, Martin, I think you're flying over reality from 10,000 feet. Just to pick one point from the several you made, which don't really all stack up, it's not a costed proposal. It is.
7 billion.
No, costed means paying for it. You can put a price on everything. A costed proposal is one where you're funding it. So it was a briefing to the Times that splashed the Times yesterday. There wasn't an indication really of how it would be paid for. Government debt is now over £2 trillion.
I'd like the Labour Party to come forward and say what they would do with inheritance tax, because the last thing they said was that they would lower the threshold. So that's the last thing. And that was bringing it down to just over £100,000, 125,000. So this is what I was reading. I went to have a look around about that figure. I'm not sure the exact number, but it was
that's
just...
the majority of homeowners.
And that is most homeowners, even if you're in the red wall, where house prices are somewhat cheaper, although inflation is pushing everything up, including house prices, although it'll be interesting to see what happens with regard to that and interest rates. But the bottom line is this. If Labour Party are planning to do that, I think that'd be very, very unpopular.
Well,
I'd like to hear what
they're not, and I think it would be a very bad move politically if they go into election promising to hike IHT, and they're not daft. I don't think they will.
Well, it's almost as intelligent as their move to close down all private schools, or
that's not Labour policy.
No,
it's
it
not
was
Labour policy.
To increase, take away the charitable status of private schools, which would amount to that in many cases.
No, it wouldn't, because that.
No, it would do. I've been reading about it. In fact, I did a whole piece on it yesterday. It was predicted. The IFS said that it would be between 3 to 7% of people who send their kids to these private schools that would withdraw them. But if they got those calculations wrong, then it could end up with some closures. And I've actually had lots and lots of messages from people on Twitter, even yesterday, telling me how one lady who, Labour have basically misunderstood what a private school is, and that they are imagining Eton, where there are small schools that deal with special needs as well. This is another one of their policies.
So I think your stat was 3% of...
3 to 7%.
OK, so that
was the IFS stat.
OK, so pick the one in the middle, 5%. A withdrawal of 5% pupils, when some of them are oversubscribed, is not going to shut down...
No, I didn't say that. I agree with you. I didn't say that. I said that if they've got that wrong, if that stat is wrong and it's a lot more, then a lot of people will find themselves out of schools. And it will affect individuals anyway. So to see it like that, I think is a...
It will force out those who are just about managing to get their kids into private schools by sacrificing everything they've got. And it won't affect the Etonians, and it won't affect the Chinese students coming over who can afford to pay treble. It will squeeze out the aspirational working classes.
Well, it won't do that, very briefly, because the inflation hikes and independent school fees have already shown there is some kind of basically elasticity of demand. So a small price change is not going to lead to a collapse in revenue for public schools.
Well, they haven't added the other bit as well, so there'll be a small price change plus that as well. It's not just going to be one thing that will add on to that. That'll be double then, is what
I think we're envisaging a dystopian future which is not going to come to pass.
Well, dystopian future, as in that if we're intelligent enough, we won't elect them. No, I'm just saying that. Right.
How mean! How mean!
Right. Well, let's move on. In an effort to promote sustainability in the housing sector, new developments in the UK are facing roadblocks unless local councils agree to implement green initiatives such as ULEZ and LTN neighbourhoods. Now, it comes with new rules to ensure housing meets net zero targets are causing much concern for Brits. Under new proposals, people will be blocked from letting properties unless they upgrade to meet energy efficiency targets as soon as 2028. So let's go over to my panel, Martin Torbley and Peter Edwards. Martin, what do you make?
This is when the mask slips. The net zero zealots say it's about salvation. It's about taxation. It's about taking everything you've got in the guise of saving the planet. It's about stopping you driving. It's about getting your old car off the road, which affects the poorest, the hardest. We're seeing that in London. There's a massive backlash to Sadiq Khan's expansion of ULEZ to all of Greater London. Nobody was consulted. The figures are dubious. He claims 4,000 deaths per year. An FOI showed directly caused by pollution was only 1. So there's a lot of debate around the data. And now this is NIMBYism meets net zeroism. You can't even build a house unless you subscribe to this policy where we're going to charge you to drive. We're going to close back streets, which actually puts congestion on main roads. On main roads, typically poorer people live because main roads are cheaper. So therefore, you're shifting the problem. You're not stopping the problem. And in terms of rural development, well, we have the cleanest air since the Industrial Revolution. London's air is cleaner now than it was in the 1890s because the background pollution of people burning coal and all that has gone. Cars are getting cleaner anyway. This is a dystopian future, I think, where in the countryside, we've all got to cycle around. How do you cycle around if you're a tradesman, if you're a working class worker?
Well, you could put your ladders on the back of your bike.
Or balance them on your head.
Balance them on your head, I think it's what it is.
It's all about this kind of puritanical, ecological worldview crashing into reality and making it more expensive for all of us to live, to eat, to travel and to work and to exist.
Well, and ironically, both parties are up to this. So this isn't a party political thing because they're both going for the same thing.
But I'm glad you said that because this is a proposal in respect of one local authority by a government quango. I think it's Natural England, do correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
In relation to Epping Forest, which is on the border of Essex and London, it's a Tory-controlled council. It's at proposal stage, as I understand it. It hasn't happened. And Epping Council, I'd imagine, will challenge it. I think there are huge cons. There might be some upsides, but I think it probably won't happen.
And you are right.
Let's hope so, because in Sadiq Khan's London, when people don't vote for things, he just forces them through.
Yeah, and you are right to say that this is a uni-party approach. We don't have any political party questioning this seriously apart from Reform, who are like saying, actually, let's give an alternative to this. You know, why do we have to have net zero levies everywhere, particularly to motorists? It's a war on motorists, and it affects the poorest, the hardest. And I think it's where metropolitan zealotry crashes into reality and the poorest are getting poorer.
Well, I mean, we've obviously got the Just Stop Oil as well. And that earlier, Sir Keir Starmer claimed that a Labour staffer met with Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion in private meetings, and Suella Braverman has published a letter to Sir Keir Starmer. Now, this is a bit concerning. Suella Braverman claims that the internal memos from Just Stop Oil showed that MP Jess Morden met with the environmental groups, and says that the leaked messages prove the Labour leader's top Commons aides appears to be to have Just Stop Oil links. Sir Keir obviously denies the claim, saying that none of his team have met with the environmental group. But there seems to be a general thing here, because one of their biggest donors, Dale Vince, is obviously a supporter of Just Stop Oil. Peter?
So Keir Starmer has not met Just Stop Oil, and the PPS or Shadow Minister Jess Morden has not met Just Stop Oil. So that's just on a point of fact. And in fact, Keir Starmer, is a former lawyer, ran the CPS and has repeatedly said you must not break the law by doing protests, for example, lying down the road, which is against the law, and it's also wicked if it's doing things like stopping ambulances.
But he's more... Well, we did say that, so what you've repeated is what I said, and I did say that he has said that he didn't meet them. But he is prepared to take money, though, from people like Dale Vince who support them.
What's wrong with that?
Well, it's an indirect...
No, but sorry, what's wrong with taking... Dale Vince is a British entrepreneur. Yeah. He made his money from Green Enterprise. He's a private individual. He gave money to the Labour Party. What is wrong with taking money from someone in the UK who creates jobs and pays their taxes.
So what it allows us to ask is that why is this guy donating to a political party? What's in it for him? In the same way, which I agree, that property developers donate heavily to the Tory because they're hoping they'll get something out of it. Dale Vince has trousered over £10 million in subsidies for his sustainable energy. So if he donates to the Labour Party, which, by the way, politically, in terms of their goals, are totally aligned with Just Stop Oil. Look at the North Sea oil drilling sites, which the Labour Party, Keir Starmer floated, that he was going to block all that, and Just Stop Oil are saying, great, because that's what we want too. Except the people of Scotland, wisely, don't want that, because it creates a huge amount of jobs, it creates energy sovereignty, and if the Labour Party had half a brain, they'd be saying 300 miles to the north, Norway, in the same oil field, has a nationalised industry and everyone gets cheap energy in that country. Instead, let's close it all down and be reliant on importing stuff from around the world, because renewables aren't reliable. When the wind drops and when it gets sunny, solar panels overheat. We can't rely on renewables when we need them the most. Just Stop Oil don't accept that. Keir Starmer doesn't accept that. And I think we're completely entitled to ask, why is this fella donating millions of pounds to a party which might be giving out subsidies to him down the line?
So, what is wrong with taking a donation from a British entrepreneur?
Well, I think the problem we have with this is he's not a British entrepreneur. He's not any old British entrepreneur. He has a political agenda behind it, and that is one that would support an agenda which is stopping North Sea oil and gas drilling and supporting Just Stop Oil, who are also a politically motivated pressure group. So then the problem we have with that is obviously then he is clearly pushing that agenda alongside with them.
I think these
it's
debates,
indirect as well.
I think these debates are as old as the sun, and whoever is in opposition...
How old is the sun?
Well, billions of years.
You don't even know. You don't know. You don't know how old the sun is.
Whoever is in opposition has to raise their own funds, and whoever's the opposition tends to have less money to start with than the governing party, and obviously they have no power at all. And the Tories go through exactly the same thing. When they're in opposition, there's a lot of coverage of their donors, there's a big row about it, and then newspapers on the opposite side of the political spectrum try and pull them apart.
Yeah, but this is slightly different
funds.
because these are active donors. So some of the old donors who aren't really doing much, this is somebody who actually has a company and a business. Listen, well, we can talk about this. We'll be talking more about that as well, actually. If you just join us, welcome aboard. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Still to come, my Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, should Prince George serve in the armed forces? Breaking centuries of tradition, the Prince and Princess of Wales have decided that young Prince George will not be expected to serve in the military before becoming monarch. Instead, Prince William will be determined for his son to shape his own destiny. Plus, stay tuned at 5 o'clock as my mystery outside guest. You might want to be thinking outside of the box. This is a clue to guess who he might be. He spent his younger years making his way into the world of athletics, excelling at running, hurdles, pole vaulting and loads more. All of that after your latest weather.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. July's relatively showery theme will be continuing over the next few days. Low pressure is gradually pushing its way off towards the north, so the winds will be easing, but for the time being, southern areas of Scotland down into north-east England could still see some blustery winds into the start of this evening. Some longer spells of rain for northern and western Scotland. Elsewhere, the thunderstorms and heavy showers we have seen will slowly be easing their way out, and underneath some of those clearer skies, temperatures will just drop down to around 11-12 degrees Celsius overnight. Might drop into single figures in some rural spots as well. Does though mean that we'll see a decent amount of sunshine first thing on Monday morning, but we will then see those scattered showers developing once again as we head throughout the day, particularly for eastern, central, southeastern areas of England. Some of those could be quite heavy in nature, maybe with some thunderstorms again and some hail possible also. But there will be some sunshine in between those scattered showers, and with winds lighter compared to the weekend, it will just feel that bit warmer. Temperatures ranging between 18 and 23 degrees Celsius. For Tuesday, though, we have to watch as our next low pressure centre is going to push its way in from the west. So turning quite damp first thing on Tuesday morning for Northern Ireland, and that rain will then steadily progress its way into parts of northern Wales, northern England and then Scotland later on. The far south-east generally staying drier, but there is still the chance of further showers as we do head towards the rest of the week. Bye-bye.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Fabulous. Well, listen, stay tuned. Loads more still to come in the next hour.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my new show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m, where real people get to meet those in power and hold them to account. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country in the real world. Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media.
We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, hello and welcome. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, and also author and campaigner for Children in Care, Chris Wilde. But before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon to you. It is 4:01. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. The UK has become the first European country to formally join the Indo-Pacific trade bloc, potentially creating access to £12 trillion worth of global business. The Business and Trade Secretary, Kemi Badenoch, says the deal will bring British companies a step closer to selling to a market of 500 million people with fewer barriers. Some everyday items from countries within the bloc, such as Australian Ugg boots, for example, should become cheaper for consumers. It's estimated the agreement will come into effect towards the end of 2024. Nigel Huddleston, the International Trade Minister, told GB News the deal will help to grow the UK economy.
Talking about billions of pounds of additional economic activity right across the country. It will benefit every nation and region of the UK. It's not just about where we are now, but where this could go in the future as well, because we expect the membership of CPTPP to expand over the coming years. So I wouldn't be too obsessed with the current numbers. This is about the potential growth for the UK economy.
Well, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says the trade deal is a start, but more is needed.
Any trade deal is good. I wouldn't call this one massive, but it's certainly not a plan for growth. And the problem is we've not had a plan for growth for 13 years under this government. We still haven't got a plan for growth. So, yes, look, a trade deal is always a step in the right direction, but this is not a plan for growth, and it's that failure to have a plan for growth that's left us in the economic mess that we're in.
The Home Secretary has published a letter to Sir Keir Starmer claiming a Labour staffer had private meetings with representatives from Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion. Suella Braverman's claiming internal memos from Just Stop Oil show the MP Jess Morden met the environmental groups to convince them how Labour is still driven by the environment. The Home Secretary called for the sacking of Ms Morden, but Sir Keir Starmer's rebuffed those claims, saying none of his team are meeting Just Stop Oil. The environmental group, though, tweeted a response claiming Suella Braverman's inventing stories to distract from the truth. Former soldiers could be called on to join a reserve force for future crises. The Sunday Telegraph is claiming it's part of a planned overhaul of the military, which would reduce the British Army to its smallest size since the Napoleonic Wars. Ministers are expected to defend the proposals, part of the long-awaited Defence Command paper, insisting the war in Ukraine shows how UK forces can become more agile. Well, the army currently consists of more than 75,000 personnel. The paper's reporting, though, the government will announce plans to cut it to 73,000. At least 4,000 people have been evacuated as a result of a raging forest fire in Spain. The fire in La Palma started in a wooded area on the island in the Canaries yesterday morning. 10 aerial units and 300 firefighters on the ground have been trying to bring the fire under control. At least 13 houses have been destroyed as it's crossed the island. Authorities say the fire has affected almost 115,000 acres of land. Meanwhile, firefighters are still battling a hotel fire in East Sussex over 18 hours after it began, with high winds making it even more difficult. Emergency services were called to the Royal Albion Hotel, which has been reduced to a burnt-out shell. That was in Brighton yesterday evening. Well, East Sussex Fire and Rescue Service say no one's been injured, but people had to be evacuated from nearby buildings because of an extremely challenging set of conditions. Significant smoke remains in the atmosphere around the hotel, and police have advised the public to stay away. Now, Novak Djokovic is on court. Currently, he's up against Carlos Alcaraz at the Wimbledon men's final. They're into the second set, at least into a tie-break. Some distinguished guests there as well. The Prince and Princess of Wales have brought their children, Prince George and Princess Charlotte, to the royal box to keep an eye on events. Novak Djokovic hoping to secure a record-equalling eighth Wimbledon title. That record is held by Roger Federer. And I'm just going to let you know that Djokovic is a set up 6-1. He won the first. The second set's gone to a tie-break, and it is 5-4 to Alcaraz. Meanwhile, in another match, 17-year-old Henry Searle has become the first Briton to win the Wimbledon boys singles title since 1962, beating Yaroslav Demin 6-4, 6-4. British actress and singer Jane Birkins died at the age of 76 in her home in Paris. President Macron has paid tribute to her and has described her as a French icon. Jane Birkin charmed France with her British music and fashion style, and her big hit Je t'aime with the late Serge Gainsbourg. The actress was also the inspiration for the Hermes Birkin designer handbag. This is GB News. More as it happens throughout the afternoon, but now it's back to Nana.
Thank you, Aaron. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. It's fast approaching 7 minutes after 4 o'clock. To all you haters out there, Remoaners who refuse to accept that Brexit has happened and did everything in your power to scupper it or redirect it. You know who you are. Some Remainers quoting the weekly savings on the Brexit bus, laughing in the faces of those who voted to leave, patronisingly remarking that we didn't know what we were voting for, hating Boris with a vengeance and seeing his demise as an opportunity to turn back the clock. For those of you who couldn't accept the results of a democratic vote and called those who supported it racist, which is odd because Brexit removes the privilege from people in the EU who are mostly Caucasian, so white, and plus it means that they get an equal footing with people from other nations when trying to enter this country. For all of you, this is a very important and defining step. Business Secretary Kemi Badenoch has signed up to a historic treaty to join a £12 trillion international trade bloc and become the first European nation to do so. The Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or CPTPP. It was created in 2018 and includes Australia, Brunei, Canada, Chile, Japan, Malaysia, Mexico, New Zealand, Peru, Singapore and Vietnam. Being a member loosens restrictions on trade between these countries and means reduced tariffs, and it covers around about 500 million people. Kemi said that it placed us at the top table of the Indo-Pacific group and held the step as the clearest demonstration of yet of our found freedom outside the EU. And unlike the deal that we had with the EU, there is no requirement to surrender British sovereignty or be governed by judges sitting in a foreign country. I know you might be saying that we have a deal with most of these countries anyway, but this deal represents closer alliance with a growing trade bloc rather than a shrinking one, the shrinking one of the EU. And getting in there at the start and being an early adopter is a huge benefit. The potential of this relationship is huge, with China already applying to join and America sniffing at the edges. Economists have described membership of this 11-country bloc as a massive global event. The UK, no longer a member of the EU, can now trade globally without restriction. Yes, you heard it, trade globally without having to follow EU rules. Hallelujah! This deal opens up the world. I know people will be saying that it represents 0.08% of GDP over 10 years and that it doesn't replace the EU, but that's not the point. Not only would the deal open major new markets to the UK and ultimately could mean lower prices for many of our household goods, it will make it nigh on impossible to rejoin the EU. So if the Tories do leave office, which is looking more and more likely, they will leave it securing Brexit by default. Well done, Kemi Badenoch and her party, for securing the deal which will come into play in 2024. The EU isn't the be-all and end-all. Granted, geographically they are the closest, but in this interconnected world, what does that matter? Brexit is safe. So before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today for the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, should Prince George serve in the armed forces? Breaking centuries of tradition, the Prince and Princess of Wales have decided that the young Prince George will not be expected to serve in the military before becoming monarch. Instead, Prince William will be determined to allow his son to shape his own destiny. Then at 4:50, it's World View. We'll be heading towards the US to get an update on Joe Biden's surprisingly large campaign haul ahead of the 2024 election. And we'll be checking in Moscow for the latest and for whether Putin's grip on power might finally be loosening. Then stay tuned at 5 o'clock as This Week's Outside. You might want to be thinking outside the box. Yes, it's a joke, but it's a pun to guess my guest. Now, he spent his younger years making his way into the world of athletics, excelling at running, hurdles and pole vaulting. He's estimated to have coached nearly 20,000 people. Do you know who he is? Keep guessing. That's coming up in the next hour. As ever, tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at GBNews. Right, so let's get started. Let's welcome again to my panel journalist and commentator and broadcaster Danny Kelly, and also author and campaigner for Children in Care, Chris Wilde. Welcome, Chris. Are you wild?
Thank you.
It's an old gag. I bet everyone does.
Good one. Always, always.
Always, always. Well, I'll start with Danny so he can kick things off. Danny.
Yes.
Nice to see you, by the way.
Good afternoon. Another 2 pounds of weight loss.
I wasn't going to ask.
You were going to say that.
What, did you go to the loo?
11 pounds in total.
Oh, that's
I'm going
really
to try
good.
and get down closer to my wedding weight, which was about 3 stone ago.
Was that really?
Yeah.
You just bring in a picture of you getting married, or just you can fuss out your wife's face, but then we can see what you look like, what you look like there.
Before and after.
Did you have hair?
No, I've been bald since the age. I told you, Chris, didn't I?
You shouldn't laugh, Chris. You're on your way. He's on his way.
I went to Turkey for mine. So. Yeah, I went to Turkey and had my hair done. So.
Did you?
Yeah.
What were you like? Completely bald?
No, I wasn't. But I was receding. But so much so, I just became really depressed with it. And every time I went out, people didn't recognise anything apart from my head, saying, "Oh, you're going bald." That's all I got everywhere I went. So.
Is it?
Never underestimate.
But it suits you, Danny. You look well. You've got the build for it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, some people it suits, but when I was going bald, maybe we should do a feature on it one day. When I was 25, I went through mental turmoil. Mental turmoil. So it's not easy. It's not easy.
No, nobody says it is. I mean, I'm bald underneath this.
Oh.
No, I've got hair, but anyway. So let's start with this.
We're talking about the New Deal.
The New Deal.
Listen, I think it's amazing. When I started selling cars, you've got to start somewhere. And I started selling cars from my home address. Now, you imagine what it's like having strangers coming into your house to buy a car off a car dealer, but he's selling from home. All of these uncertainties. And you have to start small. And I'm confident that with this New Deal, and I'm hoping that maybe when Biden gets the boot, because the only reason we haven't got a successful trade deal with the USA was because Trump lost the election. If Trump was in power, then we'd have had that deal. So all of the Romaniacs are saying, oh, you didn't get the Yankee deal, didn't get the American deal. That's not through a fault of our own. It's because of the president who was booted out. Otherwise, we would have got that deal. So I'm hoping that Biden gets the sack. I'm hoping that there's an American Republican who wants to do a favourable trade deal with us. But you're right, Nana. The problem is with Brexit is so divided. It's difficult to look at things objectively. And I would love for some Remainers to say, do you know what? OK. We're actually doing OK, and this New Deal is something that is maybe the genesis of something bigger. So fair play to you. Let's see what we can do.
But they're not saying that, are they?
No, they're not, because
it's only 0.08%, not even 1% of your GDP over 10 years.
It's impossible to concede any ground with this debate.
Is that what you think, Chris? Were you a Remainer?
Yeah, well, I wasn't at all, and I'll tell you something now. Every time my wife goes to Tesco's and buys coffee, she comes back and says, we're getting a divorce because that cost me £6 and you voted Brexit. And I'm like, well, no, that's not the point. And there's a lot of there's a dichotomy out there, like you've just said, about Brexit and those who Remainers. For me, I just want to see the economy thrive. I work out in the streets, I go into the communities, and I want to see people, be able to make a living, to go out there, to start up a company and thrive. And I think this, for me, is great. It really does show that things are progressing, things are moving forward, and I want to see the market prices going down. Every time I go to the shop, I spend 30 quid, I come home with nothing. And something has got to give here, and I think this is an opportunity to put that back into the country, see things, food in particular, reduce, and let people live a life again and have some money in their pocket.
But people would argue that we haven't got that close relationship now with the bloc that is closest to us, which is the EU. I mean, do you not think about that? And there's lots of businesses out there as well who look at this and think...
But the thing is about the EU, the whole thing about Brexit is to reduce restrictions, so we're able to thrive, so we're able to do things, so young people can become entrepreneurs. We don't want the powers of Europe hanging over us, dangling carrots, saying, this is what you're going to do, you can't do this, you can't do that. We do need that freedom, and I'm saying this as a socialist, as a Labour voter.
You're a Labour, I know.
Exactly.
We got him on to have an opposite voice, but he's agreeing with us, which is good, because it makes sense. But
of course it makes sense.
But there is that voice. I mean, and people are still trying to drag us back into the EU. It's almost like an obsession. And I wonder what it is, why there is that obsession.
Because it's security, it's safety, isn't it? I think for many years, there's been this ominous cloud over this country saying you can't do anything without Europe, you can't be independent ever again. And a lot of people believe that. The mob is fickle. But, I know, you go out into the communities, you speak to people, a lot of people voted Brexit for a reason. And, you go to the north, and geographically, ironically, they say people in the north, Hull, Manchester, a lot of these people voted Brexit. Why did they vote Brexit? Because enough is enough. They want to be able to have their freedom and independence.
Well, I think, generally speaking, and it's a broad term, but generally speaking, people who voted Remain really valued freedom of movement because they would benefit from it. They would maybe travel freely across Europe. They would maybe import stuff from Europe. Freedom of movement. And you won't recognise it in my voice, but I'm a Scouser by birth. And
no, we can recognise it.
You can? Oh, well, very mild.
You've not disguised it well. I can recognise
It's quite strong.
We're good all here.
20 years
it's
ago...
pretty strong, is it? What do you think he is? I think he thinks he's got the Queen's dignity.
Oh, by the way, I don't want to lose my man of the people status, but I'm wearing UGG trainers, and apparently UGG products are going to come down in price because we've got this new deal with Australia. So that's a good thing. Potentially, yeah. So, do you know, I've lost my train of thought. You're taking the mickey out of me so much. What was I saying?
You're telling us how great your voice is.
So Remain has really valued freedom of movement. Older people really valued the security. My father, who's celebrating his 90th birthday on August the 7th, voted Remain because he literally saw bombs dropping in Liverpool.
Wow.
And he went through that, and he thought through security of a collective, then that wouldn't happen. Whereas working class people voted, they were sick of unfettered immigration, generally speaking, and they wanted to earn a few bob.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, this show is nothing without you. As ever, if you join in, you know how to do it at gbviews@gbnews.com. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Still to come, my mystery outside guest is going to be with me just after 5. He's excelled at running, hurdles, pole vaulting and boxing, but after an injury he turned himself into a coach. The result, well, you'll have to tune in and find out. Stay tuned, but first let's get some weather.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. July's relatively showery theme will be continuing over the next few days. Low pressure is gradually pushing its way off towards the north, so the winds will be easing, but for the time being, southern areas of Scotland down into north-east England could still see some blustery winds into the start of this evening. Some longer spells of rain for northern and western Scotland. Elsewhere, the thunderstorms and heavy showers we have seen will slowly be easing their way out, and underneath some of those clearer skies, temperatures will just drop down to around 11-12 degrees Celsius overnight. Might drop into single figures in some rural spots as well. It does, though, mean that we'll see a decent amount of sunshine first thing on Monday morning, but we will then see those scattered showers developing once again as we head throughout the day. Particularly for eastern, central, southeastern areas of England, some of those could be quite heavy in nature, maybe with some thunderstorms again and some hail possible also. But there will be some sunshine in between those scattered showers, and with winds lighter compared to the weekend, it will just feel that bit warmer. Temperatures ranging between 18 and 23 degrees Celsius. For Tuesday, though, we have to watch as our next low pressure centre is going to push its way in from the west. So turning quite damp first thing on Tuesday morning for Northern Ireland, and that rain will then steadily progress its way into parts of northern Wales, northern England and then Scotland later on. The far south-east generally staying drier, but there is still the chance of further showers as we do head towards the rest of the week. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Well, still to come, we'll be heading over to the US and Moscow for Worldview. Is Putin's grip on power loosening? And how is Sleepy Joe managing to raise awareness and raise cash? Find out all of that. Then on the way, the Great British Debate. That's next. I'm asking, should Prince George serve in the armed forces?
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
24 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Right now, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, should Prince George serve in the armed forces? Now, Prince George will reportedly not be expected to serve in the military before becoming king. Speaking ahead of the young prince's birthday, a long-time friend of William has said that the rules are different now and he wouldn't necessarily have to follow the old formula of going into the military and then royal life. Now, will breaking the tradition of members of the royal family serving in the army mean a new era for British royalty? With Prince Harry facing backlash for disclosing his kill count, I mean, what was he thinking in his book Spare? It was a disaster, that book. He shouldn't have bothered with it. Is it the right idea for front-facing royals to not be heavily involved in military combat? So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, what do you think? Should Prince George serve in the armed forces? I'm joined now to discuss Martin Daubney, GB News contributor and former MEP, Peter Edwards, former editor of The Labour List, Will Geddes, defence and security expert, and Michael Cole, former BBC Royal correspondent. I'm going to start with you, Michael Cole. It would be potentially breaking years and years and years of tradition.
A pound to a penny, Nana, Prince George will serve in the armed forces in due course. Of course, his parents will consult him, and of course they'll give him a choice, but he will, because in due course, if history takes its proper course, he will become King George VII, and it would be unthinkable as the commander-in-chief of our armed forces had he not worn the uniform of his own country. So this story, based upon the word of an anonymous friend of Prince William, has been seriously overcooked. I know the charming and excellent journalist who wrote it, but it has been overcooked. There's no way he won't serve in the armed forces. The last king to lead Britain in battle was King George II, his namesake, in 1743 at the Battle of Dettingen. against the French. It hasn't happened since, but there's been a long history. His great-grandfather, Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, he served in the Second World War. He was mentioned twice in dispatches. And he said to me once in an interview that the armed forces give the royal princes a safe place to be. If they were in the commercial world, if they worked for this Ford company, then General Motors would complain that it was unfair competition.
Actually, you make a good point.
Keep them out of the commercial world in a safe place where they can be guarded to some extent from the intrusions of the media. So it's an interesting story, but not worth putting on the front
I think you make a
page.
good point. And actually, what would they do, as we've seen in the case of Prince Harry? He doesn't know what he's doing. Let's go to Will Geddes. Will Geddes.
Hi, Nana. Well, I kind of follow really what Michael's saying there. I think it would be sad if he didn't take an active role, certainly as he will be king one day as the Commander-in-Chief, and he hasn't actually experienced it. You know, we have three branches. We've got the British Army, the Royal Navy, and the Royal Air Force. And the British Army and the Royal Air Force have to pledge allegiance to the sovereign. The only one that doesn't is the Royal Navy, because it was formed by the monarchy and not by Parliament. So I'm sure his parents are going to give him an option. It's not going to be forced on him. And for many of the royal family members, it is a ceremonial title. They may be named as the head of a particular unit or a particular branch of the military. But fundamentally, I'm sure he will want to follow in his father's footsteps and in his grandfather's footsteps as well, and those before.
Do you think, maybe he's not the fighting type, but anyway, I think that they cause more trouble when they're in those positions than out. Let's go to Peter Edwards.
I don't know if they cause more trouble.
No, they do, because no. By that I mean, if you imagine all the people who had to protect Prince Harry when he went into combat were risking their lives. I mean, only for him to expose them later. But I mean, you know, it just seems a bit. I'd rather they weren't in there. That way, the others wouldn't put their lives at risk. But what do you think, Peter?
Well, anyone, and I hate this phrase, but anyone who's a kind of VIP or very, very important person will attract that attention. The army's got to be able to look after its comrades. But I think it's right that the prince is an adult, and he's just a little boy at the moment, we've got to remember, still at primary school, can make his own choices in life. But as Michael Cole rightly said, the case for serving in the army, apart from patriotism and swearing the oath and everything else, is, as he says, it gives a prince or princess a chance to grow up privately. 18, 19, 20 is still young, is still working out your way in life, away from media intrusion. But it also allows you to have a boss. And the royal family don't have a boss like the rest of us in their life. But in any of the services, they'll have someone more senior telling them what to do every day. So it is a taste of normality. So I think there's something to be said for it. But, you know, we're talking about a little boy. Who could be against the idea that he chooses his own way in life?
Martin.
The military legitimises the royal family. It gives them a sense of purpose and it gives them a sense of honour. And I think in terms of public perception, let's not forget, even Prince Harry was at his most popular when he was in Afghanistan. And Prince William, when he was flying the helicopter, people respected that, they admired that, and it gives them a sense of purpose between adulthood and then their role in the monarchy. If George's role is in the private sector, then disaster awaits, because there'll be all sorts of accusations of his royal patronage being applied to the private sector. He'll be much more likely to get damaged as a brand, as an individual, and the royal family as an institution if he goes into the private sector with all of the kind of affiliated risks of favouritism, of abuse of title. Actually, the military is a far safer place for a fledgling, budding monarch than the private sector. And I think it sends a real negative message out about the future of our armed services too. They're already beleaguered, their funding is cut, and I think they need a figurehead. And the second in line to the throne should be that figurehead.
But so you all agree? I mean, listen, I don't see why he should have to do that, personally. I mean, but I get it, that he's got nowhere else to go. Will, is it a security risk then for him to do anything else at that point in his life anyway?
Yeah, I'd agree with the rest of the panel on that. I think outside of the confines of the military, and again, you know, drawing on many of the points all the other guests have mentioned, you know, he will learn a sense of discipline, both self-discipline, but also reporting to others, which, other than obviously his father and his family, he won't necessarily be in a position where he has to fall in line with fellow members of his unit or his regiment, wherever he is assigned. So whilst he's there, you have a number of other individuals who are also going to be armed, who are going to be combatants, are going to be fit, are going to be trained. You couldn't be in a more secure environment being amongst his fellow troops than he would be in the private sector. So, to be honest, if you wanted him to be safe, it's probably the safest place, despite the fact that he may, as his father has, as his uncle has, and other members of the family, serving obviously in hostile risk environments.
Well, I think, if they all agree, that's fair enough. Martin Daubney, thank you very much. GB News contributor and former MEP. Also, Peter Edwards, former editor of the Labour List. Will Geddes, he's a defence and security expert. And Michael Cole, former BBC Royal correspondent. Thank you for your thoughts. Well, what do you think? Let's have a quick look at what you've been saying. Janine says Prince George should serve because the forces are very loyal to their commander-in-chief. Loyalty should be earned by the time he becomes king. Well, this as well, but that didn't work for Harry, did it? I mean, look what's happened to Harry. It's bad, isn't it? Terrible what happened to Harry. John says if he's going to become the head of the armed forces, he needs to understand how it works. And Jim says absolutely he will one day become head of the state. However, at age 9, I think the press need to lay off. Well, I like that. We'll be discussing it in the Great British Debate, though, so we ain't going anywhere. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua, on TV, online and on digital radio. On the way, the Great British Debate, I'll be asking, should Prince George serve in the armed forces? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, journalist and broadcaster Danny Kelly, and also author and campaigner for Children in Care, Chris Wilde. And then stay tuned at 5. I have a very, very special guest following a devastating back injury. My sporting hero decided to focus on boxing and eventually become a professional fighter. Who is he? He's on the way at 5. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Hi there, it is 4:32. Aaron Armstrong here in the GB newsroom. The UK has become the first European country to formally join the Indo-Pacific trade bloc, potentially creating access to £12 trillion worth of global business. Kemi Badenoch, the business secretary, says the deal brings Britain closer to having access to a market of 500 million people with fewer barriers, which should make some everyday items cheaper. It's estimated to come into effect towards the end of next year. Ms Badenoch, though, admitted a free trade agreement with the United States is now highly unlikely. The Home Secretary's published a letter to Sir Keir Starmer alleging a Labour staffer met Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion representatives in private meetings. Suella Braverman is claiming internal memos from the campaign group Just Stop Oil showed the MP Jess Morden met environmental groups to, in her words, sell them on how Labour is still driven by the environment. The Home Secretary called for the sacking of Ms Morden. Just Stop Oil, though, have responded, saying Suella Braverman is inventing stories to distract from the truth. And firefighters are still battling a blaze at a hotel in East Sussex over 20 hours after it began, with high winds hampering the efforts. Emergency services were called to the Royal Albion Hotel, which has been reduced to a shell. They were called yesterday evening, while East Sussex Fire and Rescue Services say no one's been injured, but people have had to be evacuated from nearby buildings because of the extremely challenging conditions. More on all of our stories on our website, gbnews.com, and I'll be back with more in about half an hour's time. Now, it's over to Nana.
So up next is time for the Great British Debate, where I'll be asking, should Prince George serve in the armed forces? Don't go anywhere.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle. Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
and action.
Sergeant, read my superstar panel that are already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon, welcome back. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Right, so it's time now for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, should Prince George serve in the armed forces? Now, Prince George will reportedly not be expected to serve in the military before becoming king. And speaking ahead of the young prince's birthday, a long-time friend of William has said that the rules are different now and he wouldn't necessarily have to follow the old formula of going into the military and royal life. So will breaking the tradition of members of the royal family serving in the army mean a new era for the British royalty? Loads of, obviously, backlash from Prince Harry when he disclosed his kill count. I mean, what was he doing on that disastrous memoir, Spare, which hopefully there won't be another one on the way. So a lot of royals, you know, this is what he did with his combat. It's worrying, but do you think that Prince George should go into combat and be part of the military? Obviously not going to combat, there won't be a war. So for the Great British Debate, I'm just babbling. I'm asking, should Prince George serve in the armed forces? Well, joining me to discuss, journalist and broadcaster Danny Kelly, also author and campaigner for Children in Care, Chris Wilde. Right, so I'm going to go back to you, Danny.
Yes.
Prince George.
I'm a royalist. I love the royal family. I queued 10 hours to see the dead Queen, and it was a day that I'll never forget. And I think if you are a royalist, I think you need to keep with tradition. And if you start chipping away at tradition, then I think that leaves the door open to people saying, well, look, it's not the royal family that we used to love. If you're going to be the head of the army, great hotel managers, what makes a great hotel manager is that they know they spend time doing housekeeping, they spend time in the kitchen, they spend time being a maintenance guy. So they get a holistic view of how to operate a successful business. And I think it's important that he does, even if it's just for plebs like me and Chris and yourself, to know.
Don't put me in the bracket of pleb.
You are a pleb.
I'm not a plebeian.
You are. You're just a normal
yourself.
woman. Okay, well,
I'm not the title of pleb.
I'm definitely a pleb, yeah.
You've got two plebs.
You've got two plebs with me, but I'm
You've
not
got a
pleb.
fat pleb, you've got a thinner pleb. And I think...
He didn't call you thin, he said thinner.
I wouldn't like a right hook.
No, that's it.
So I think it's essential that tradition is upheld.
What do you think?
Danny, I'm going to oppose that. I do apologise. It's just because I used to be in the army myself. I've done the oath of allegiance. And the thing is, as well, is
the world has changed. The royal family's changed. They're not military leaders, they're charity leaders, and I think that's where they're best placed. And I say that, you know, back in the old days when you were on a battlefield and your men are dying and you're tired, and then all of a sudden the king comes on his horse with his sword and he boosts that morale. Those days are gone now. So it's kind of like there's a bit of a narcissistic thing about the king being the head of the army and about him leading soldiers into battle. There isn't going to be any battles. It just doesn't make sense to me. And I think they're best placed just doing the charity work, come away from the military completely.
Are you a royalist?
I've got to be careful what I say here.
Why?
Because I was, and I'm not as such. I just think times changed, and we've got to change with it. And I just don't like the fact that they get all this money, all this wealth, and they don't really do anything for it. And
well, no, hang on a minute. You say they don't do anything for it.
Well, they don't. They don't do anything.
Well, no, they do, because, listen, if you have to get up at whatever AM and go to a charity and so on, so they are heads of numbers of charities. Now, the fact that they're heads of charities can boost the profitability
but
of
that's
that.
all they're good for.
Let me finish. No. I'm telling you what they do. Yeah, so they're heads of charities. So the fact that they boost the coppers of these charities, and there's hundreds of them, and these charities are for the people and benefit the people. That's something. Not only that, but also they're ambassadors for this country. So people come to this country to come and see the royal family, and that brings in billions. So it's a soft power. And then also Charles gets involved in things that he shouldn't get involved in, but let's not go there.
But that's very true. But they've also owned so much land where we could build so many houses. Yeah, the spending, what cost the royal family, could be divided all over the country, and it could change things completely.
No,
listen, yeah, we always need a head of state.
That doesn't make sense.
Well, it does make sense.
No, it doesn't, because if you okay, so sell off all the land, so that money's gone. What income? Where's the money? You get rid of the royal family. Where are you going to replace those billions that the royal family?
It's not about replacing the billions, Nana.
Well, it is, because you're talking about money. I'm talking about money.
They've got enough land, though, as well. They've got enough wealth to help, to contribute to this. And they don't... And that's just a fact. These are facts that so much money gets pumped into that royal family from taxpayers, it could change...
Well, how much do you know? It's about £1.29, isn't it? £1.29 per person. It's about £1.
Let's look at it annually. It's millions. It goes into the millions.
But it's £1. It's about £1 per person a year. £1.20 something.
Well, you're obviously a royalist.
No, I'm just counteracting your points. I don't agree with you.
Well,
I'm not a royalist.
I think I'm a realist, and the word on the street is that young people don't want to... Do they want a royal family? Look at the stats, look at the data out there, but about 50% of people don't want it, 50% do, so...
Well, that's not quite true. The stats are slightly different, and as you get older, more and more people want them. So as you get older, maybe, well...
But it's a personal opinion. It's a personal opinion.
We're distilling it down between being a royalist and being a Republican. Yeah. And people who are on the left of politics tend to, if you like, care about people who are skint, and that's where Chris is coming from. That's his position. I care about people who are skint, but I'm more of a capitalist, and I am a royalist because I believe that the income that they generate...
Well, that's where I stand.
Yeah. But also there's something quite galling. I know it's only £1.20 a year, if that's what you say, but they're so minted, Nana. These are multi
Exactly. It's wealth on a different level. People can't even dream of that wealth.
But getting back to the original question about Prince George going into the army, my position...
Well, hang on a minute. The position that you've pointed is a bit of a conflict of interest then. So where is it that you stand?
Oh.
You're on the fence, but you're sort of...
No, I'm not on the fence. You should be in the army.
It'll be a very strong fence, but you're on it anyway.
No, look, Nana, look, I have lost £11. I'm gradually a couple of pounds a week. Nana, I'm a royalist. I like the royal family. The question is should Prince George go in the army? My position is that he should, because I think it's an important symbolic... He's not going to start fighting on the front line. Fingers crossed there won't be any sort of military conflict. He can wear those stupid ceremonial uniforms, and he can wave to the plebs like Chris and I off the Buckingham Palace balcony every year, and it makes me feel good.
And the better in positions of charity, like you said, they can boost more money for charity, help poor people. That's what they're good for.
Well, maybe they do a lot of that as well, so hopefully they'll carry on with that. But this show is nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome our Great British Voice on their opportunity to be on the show and tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing. Let's head over to Kidderminster. Let's have a chat with John Reid. He's always got something to say that's interesting. John Reid, let's just quickly talk about the royal family briefly, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of Prince George. But what do you think? Royal family, they're a good thing, right?
I think absolutely, Nana. I'm with you. I'm a royalist through and through, have been all my life. Of course, we lost our dear Queen last year, but the royal family will change and has changed in many ways over the years. But I'm absolutely with you. I think the royal family should remain forever, and I don't care how much money they've got. I've got a little bit less, but I'm not bothered. I'm not into money, really.
Yeah, well, I'm into money, but I don't really care that £1.20 something for all the good they do and the tourism. I'm happy with that. What about Prince George now? Should he go into the armed forces, or should he just? Is it time for them to just not bother with that?
Well, I think he should, although I think he should also have the choice to go in, and that's something, isn't it? I do a bit of work in prison, and I'm currently talking to a guy who was in Afghanistan with Harry. So Harry could very well say, as he has in his book, that he fought and he killed certain numbers of people, etc. But I'm not sure, even if they go into a war situation, they're actually in the same danger as some of our ordinary citizens would be. So I don't think it would do him any harm to go in the armed forces, but at the end of the day, I think it should be his choice and not anybody else's.
Interesting. Thank you very much for that, John. Good to talk to you. That's John Reid. He's there in Kidderminster. He's our great British voice. Well, today I've been asking, should Prince George serve in the armed forces? And lots of you have been getting in touch. Nadia says, you can't understand the armed forces unless you serve. Sal says, if Prince George one day expects the forces to pledge allegiance to him, which he might, then he should first show his worth to them. And he says, if he doesn't want to serve, then he should not be allowed to succeed his father. After all, he'll be head of several regiments. And Angela says, I don't think so, because he may not want to. It should be his choice. Mark says, I've always felt military service gives the royal family credibility and respect. By the sounds of it, it gives them something to do, frankly, because otherwise, what will he do? You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. On the way, he's coached almost 20,000 people, thought to be a record. All will be revealed with my mystery guest in Outside at just after 5. But first, let's get an update with your weather.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. July's relatively showery theme will be continuing over the next few days. Low pressure is gradually pushing its way off towards the north, so the winds will be easing, but for the time being, southern areas of Scotland down into north-east England could still see some blustery winds into the start of this evening. Some longer spells of rain for northern and western Scotland. Elsewhere, the thunderstorms and heavy showers we have seen will slowly be easing their way out, and underneath some of those clearer skies, temperatures will just drop down to around 11-12 degrees Celsius overnight. Might drop into single figures in some rural spots as well. It does, though, mean that we'll see a decent amount of sunshine first thing on Monday morning, but we will then see those scattered showers developing once again as we head throughout the day. Particularly for eastern, central, southeastern areas of England, some of those could be quite heavy in nature, maybe with some thunderstorms again and some hail possible also. But there will be some sunshine in between those scattered showers, and with winds lighter compared to the weekend, it will just feel that bit warmer. Temperatures ranging between 18 and 23 degrees Celsius. For Tuesday, though, we have to watch as our next low pressure centre is going to push its way in from the west. So turning quite damp first thing on Tuesday morning for Northern Ireland, and that rain will then steadily progress its way into parts of northern Wales, northern England and then Scotland later on. The far south-east generally staying drier, but there is still the chance of further showers as we do head towards the rest of the week. Bye-bye.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, we'll head over to LA and Moscow for Worldview. The case of mysterious White House cocaine has apparently been solved, plus 2 assassination attempts against prominent Russian journalists. We'll have the latest from Russia in a moment.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, this is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Don't forget as well, you can download the GB News app and check everything out. But now it's time for World View. And President Vladimir Putin in Russia had a sufficient stockpile of cluster bombs and reserved for them to use. Joining me to talk about this and all things Russia in Russia is journalist Alexei Ver. Let's head over to, I think it's Moscow. I think that's where he is. Alexei, so talk to me then. So an assassination attempt on two famous Russian journalists. One is Simonian, and she's the head of RT. She's in charge of a Russian foreign broadcasting. Talk to me about that. What's been going on there?
Well, yes, Nana. Russian Secret Service FSB has declared that a Russian neo-Nazi group sponsored by Ukrainian Secret Service SBU has paid them, was going to pay them roughly £17,000 for each hit. So they were going to make £34,000 for those two very famous Russian journalists. But that's a very strange choice, because on the one hand we have Margarita Simonyan, who is the head of RT, and she is responsible for Russia's foreign broadcasting, and she is considered a pro-Kremlin journalist, which she is. On the other hand, we have Ksenia Sobchak, who is considered an opposition journalist, and these two ladies actually know each other. And to put it mildly, they are not besties, so both of them were surprised that this assassination attempt was on both of them. So far, Kyiv has not commented on this, and if Ukrainian Secret Service is actually responsible for preparing an assassination attempt in Russia, Ukraine would probably be a state sponsor of terrorism, but so far we have no confirmation. Last year, though, we had a similar case where an assassination attempt was again prevented by the FSB on another famous Russian journalist, Vladimir Solovyov, who is also considered the pro-Kremlin mouthpiece. Well, another assassination attempt, which unfortunately succeeded, was on Daria Dugina, who was the daughter of famous Russian ideologist Alexander Dugin. So this situation is nothing new. So far, Margarita Simonyan herself commented on the situation, saying that those two 18-year-old boys, those Russian neo-Nazis. She hopes that they will be able to redeem their sin because they have their whole life in front of them. She wishes them to go to the battleground and fight in Ukraine. Well, regardless of what you think of Simonyan's worldview, she's not someone who can easily be intimidated because, well, she was a war correspondent when she was young. Ksenia Sobchak, on the other hand, said that, well, she doesn't know, she has no confirmation from her sources whether this assassination attempt was actually prepared, and she says she has to look more into it.
So what about Russia's disarmament then? We're hearing something about that. Is there any truth to that?
Well, let me say this. Russia is one of the 7 states that has nuclear weapons. Russia has the biggest stockpile of nuclear weapons because Russia is the successor of the Soviet Union. So out of all 15 republics, Russia is the only country that has nuclear weapons. And Russia's possession of nuclear weapons goes hand in hand with Russia's permanent place at the UN Security Council. So basically, nuclear weapons and the United Nations are 2 pillars of this new world order, which was formed after the Second World War. So Russia's right to be a permanent member of the Security Council and to possess nuclear weapons, Russia didn't win it in a lottery. The Soviet Union paid for this right with the lives of 27 million people. So I don't think this is something that can be easily taken away from Russia. So this sounds nothing like a pipe dream of those Western propagandists and pundits who wish for Russia's collapse, wish for Russia's disarmament. They can't even disarm North Korea. Like, what do we have to say about Russia? And one more thing, they connect the end of Putin's reign, the end of Putin's regime, to the end of Russia. I just have to say that Putin is not Russia. Russia is a country with 1,000-year-old history. And, well, it was before, and it will always be.
Alexei, listen, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Alexei Vir, he's there in Russia. That was, of course, Worldview. Let's head over to the States now and have a chat with the host of the Politics People podcast, Paul Duddridge, and find out what's going on there. Let's head over to LA. That's where he is. Let's start with Joe Biden. What a guan with Joe Biden. Sleepy Joe, what's happening with him?
Sleepy Joe, very successful Joe at the moment. He's raised $72 million for his campaign. Since he announced in April, he's actually now officially the front runner in campaign funding. I think Trump is only at $30 to $40 million since he announced. He is doubling every quarter. But yeah, Joe Biden's had an extremely successful first quarter of fundraising. So that bodes well. That means he's probably not going to get out of the race for quite a while. So yeah, it's been a very bumper time for him. Now, this is all the money, this campaign funding for Joe Biden does include all the money from the Democratic, the DNC, the Democrat Party, basically, as well as individual donations for Joe Biden. So that's pulling together every single dime that has been raised for him. But that surprised a lot of people, how successful he's been raising funds this quarter.
Yeah, well, they may have surprised them, but that's the last thing they really seriously want, because if he's at the helm, no one with half a brain will vote for him, surely. What about Hunter Biden? What's happening with his son?
This is the great story. So the Secret Service closed their investigation about the cocaine in the White House. We talked about that, and that story could be gone now. That could be over, and the wise thing to do would just be, look, the Secret Service have closed their investigation after 11 days with identifying no suspects at all, okay? Hardly, they're all on camera, and they could have found a suspect, but they found no suspect. Donald Trump has been tweeting or truth socialing that the cocaine might have belonged to Hunter Biden. And instead of just ignoring it, Hunter Biden's decided to send a cease and desist letter to Donald Trump telling him to stop repeating this claim. So it just shows above everything else that Hunter Biden is the greatest optimist in American history if he thinks that a cease and desist letter is going to stop Donald Trump saying the cocaine might be Hunter's. It's a fabulous turn of events when he's snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. They closed the investigation, and now he's going toe-to-toe with Donald Trump with a cease and desist letter of all things. It's a marvellous turn of events.
And listen, very briefly, Paul, we've got about 15 seconds. Donald Trump, in a nutshell, what's going on with him?
He's 37 points ahead of DeSantis at the moment. He is on fire. He did a fantastic turning point speech yesterday. He is being feted by everybody on the right. DeSantis really is looking like he's going to have to drop out much sooner than anybody suspected. It really could happen quite soon, I think.
Well, listen, Paul Duddridge, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. That's Paul Duddridge. He says the host of the Politics People podcast. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. More to come in the next hour. So it's just gone 5 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. On the way, I've got a special guest in my Outside feature. And also, we'll have another debate in the Great British Debate. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Very good evening to you. It's 5 o'clock. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. Now, the UK has become the first European country to formally join the Indo-Pacific trade bloc, potentially creating access to £12 trillion worth of global business. The Business Secretary, Kemi Badenoch, says the deal will bring British companies a step closer to selling to a market of some 500 million people with fewer barriers. Some everyday items may well become cheaper, although critics argue the impact may be limited, with the government's technical estimates suggesting it will add £1.8 billion annually to the economy after 10 years. Nigel Huddleston, the International Trade Minister, told GB News the deal will help, though, to grow the economy.
We're talking about billions of pounds of additional economic activity right across the country. It will benefit every nation and region of the UK. It's not just about where we are now, but where this could go in the future as well, because we expect the membership of CPTPP to expand over the coming years. So I wouldn't be too obsessed with the current numbers. This is about the potential growth for the UK economy.
Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer, though, says the trade deal is a start, but more is needed.
Any trade deal is good. I wouldn't call this one massive, but it's certainly not a plan for growth. And the problem is we've not had a plan for growth for 13 years under this government. We still haven't got a plan for growth. So, yes, look, a trade deal is always a step in the right direction, but this is not a plan for growth, and it's that failure to have a plan for growth that's left us in the economic mess that we're in.
Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer's been written to by the Home Secretary. She's alleging a Labour staffer had private meetings with representatives from Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion. Suella Braverman's claiming internal memos from Just Stop Oil show that MP Jess Morden met the environmental groups to try to convince them how Labour is still driven by the environment. Well, the Home Secretary called for the sacking of Miss Morden, but Sir Keir has rebuffed claims, saying none of his team are meeting Just Stop Oil. The environmental group have also responded in a tweet. They say Suella Braverman is inventing stories to distract from the truth. At least 4,000 people have been evacuated as a result of a raging forest fire in Spain. The fire in La Palma started in a wooded area on the island in the Canaries yesterday morning. 10 aerial units and some 300 firefighters on the ground have been trying to bring the blaze under control. At least 13 houses have been destroyed on the island. The fire has crossed from one side to the other. Authorities say the fire's affected almost 115,000 acres of land. Emergency services are still attending to a fire at a hotel in Brighton almost 24 hours after it broke out. The blaze at the 200-year-old Royal Albion Hotel broke out at 5:30 yesterday. East Sussex Fire and Rescue Services say no one's been injured, but people have had to be evacuated from nearby buildings because of the extremely challenging set of conditions. Well, Novak Djokovic is facing a real battle against Carlos Alcaraz to win a record-equalling 8th men's title at Wimbledon. Djokovic, the defending champion, took the first set, 6-1, in just 34 minutes. So at that stage, it all looked very comfortable. But the world number one, Alcaraz, the 20-year-old, hit back, taking the second set on a tiebreak. And he is currently 4-1 up, so he's a break up in the third set. If Djokovic wins, he'll equal Roger Federer's singles record and Margaret Court's overall Grand Slam record. Meanwhile, in the other match, the 17-year-old Henry Searle became the first Briton to win the Wimbledon boys singles title since 1962. He beat Yaroslav Demin in straight sets 6-4, 6-4. Emergency services are searching for a teenage boy who was swept away in the North Esk River in Scotland yesterday. Police, fire and Coast Guard teams and a helicopter have been looking for the 15-year-old who got into difficulty in the water near Ganochy Bridge just after 5 o'clock on Saturday. British actress and singer Jane Birkin has died at the age of 76 in her home in Paris. Well, President Emmanuel Macron has paid tribute to her, describing Jane Birkin as a French icon. She charmed France with her British music and fashion style, and her big hit, of course, Je t'aime, with the late Serge Gainsbourg. The actress was also the inspiration for the Hermes Birkin designer handbag. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens throughout the evening. Now it's back to Nana.
Good afternoon. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, and also author and campaigner for Children in Care, Chris Wilde. Now, still to come, each Sunday at 5, I'm joined by a celebrity, a former MP, or someone who's had an incredibly interesting career, and take a look at life after the job. We talk highs, lows, and lessons learned, and what comes next on the outside. And this week, I'm joined by a mystery guest who made it into the World Championships twice, just missing out on the Olympics, but a devastating back injury meant that the sporting hero decided to focus on boxing and eventually became a professional fighter. Who do you think it is? Stay tuned. You'll find out in a couple of moments' time. He's here in the studio. Then, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should the Tories get rid of inheritance tax? It could be a real election winner for the Tories, apparently, but will they be brave enough to follow through, as Rishi Sunak teases that he'll put it into the manifesto? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.com, or tweet me at gbnews. Right, now it's time for this week's Outside. Now, my special guest was born in Newcastle. Like me, he's a Geordie, and has a passion for the sport from a very early age. Now, he spent his younger years making his way into the world of athletics, excelling at running, hurdles, pole vaulting, and boxing. Growing up, our mystery guest was full of ambition and made it into the World Championships twice, just missing out on the Olympics. But following a back injury that was quite devastating, my sporting hero decided to focus on boxing and eventually became a professional fighter. He then turned his attention to coaching and eventually created what millions of people now know as Boxercise, with his company training over 3,000 instructors a year. My mystery guest has taught over 20,000 people face-to-face. Could this be a record? In fact, I think he taught me. Of course, I'm joined by Boxercise instructor, owner Andy Wake. Andy.
Hi, Nana.
Hello.
Thank you very much for having me on.
It's nice to see you. Now,
Yeah, good to see you again.
All those years ago, I used to be an instructor, and you taught me to box.
That's right. It was in London, wasn't it? Yeah.
It was a London thing. And at that time, because that was a long time ago, it must have been, what, 12 years ago at least?
I don't know. I'd have to look back, but it would be quite a while. But it seems to me like I've been doing this forever. It's been 31, 32 years now.
32 years?
Yes. I was young when I started.
Really?
But, a bit older now.
So what about a Newcastle lad like you? And I'm trying to do my Geordie accent. Well, it was a long time ago. I left at 5.
That's one of the difficulties I found, actually, teaching on training courses, that I had to alter the way that I speak when I'm talking to people, because otherwise, if I talk in my normal accent, I'd have to repeat everything.
Is this your normal accent now?
No, this is me talking.
What do your normal
slowly.
voice?
So the way that I would explain that I would speak is the way that a French person would speak English, so they'd speak slowly and deliberately. English to me is the second language. Geordie's my first language, and when I talk faster, nobody understands what I'm saying.
Oh, I see what happened there.
So I speak more slowly, more deliberately, and then I don't have to say it twice.
So talk to me about sort of your upbringing and what brought you to Boxercise. Because I know you've done a lot of things. You had a back injury. Talk to me about that. What happened?
Well, I was always doing boxing, always did it in the background, but athletics was my first love. Pole vault was the thing that drew me. I saw the pole vaulters doing it, and I thought, I've got to try that one day. But I was very busy, and the sports coaches said, no, stick with sprinting, stick with hurdling. And eventually I got to go, and I was hooked, so to say. And I did that and got very close to qualifying for the Commonwealth Games, and suffered a motorbike injury due to my own idiocy.
Really? What happened? What did you do?
Well, as they say, smart people do smart things, stupid people do stupid things, and my actions that day spoke for themselves. I was wearing a pair of tracksuit bottoms and not much else. I did have a crash helmet, and I decided to borrow somebody else's motorbike. He lent it to me, and I rode it like an idiot and crashed it badly. And,
Did you crash into something or
a pothole?
A
pothole, and it shattered, and I just bounced end to end for, I don't know, a long way.
When you hit that pothole, in your head, did you think, this is going to hurt? As you were in the air?
can't actually repeat what I thought in the air, but I did think one word, and that was the only word that went through my head until finally I hit the road and got road rash.
Wow,
So, it was a painful learning experience, but it was a learning experience. I still ride a motorbike today, but I ride it much more carefully and wearing protective gear, which is a much more sensible thing.
So you hurt your back. What did you do to your back then?
Well, the back injury was always there and was present as a result of a birth defect called spina bifida occulta, which caused too much play, if you like, in the lower spine, and it causes the nerves to be pinched. And eventually it made it impractical for me to continue with pole vaulting certainly for some time. So I was angry. I was angry at missing out on the Commonwealth Games. And I did what angry young men do. I fought. But I was channeled into the boxing club, and that way I got some good coaching and did some rubbish jobs for 4 or 5 years. And
what was the worst job that you did?
Gosh, probably strippogram.
No.
Yeah. I said that on national TV. Yeah, strippogram.
You were a strippogram?
I was. Not the kind that gets everything out. A strippogram that surprises people and then presents them with a box of chocolates or something like that, or a bunch of flowers.
So were you scantily clad, though?
I wasn't wearing very much, yes. I was covering the important parts, but there was much to be exposed. And the worst thing was going into factories and things like that, and, that being poured at, that's quite demeaning. But for a short period of time, it was quite funny. I look on the bright side of things generally, and so I did that. So, yeah, I would say that was the worst. Stacked shelves in a supermarket.
I've done that.
That was awful. I had friends, mums, who used to come into the shop, and they'd be saying, you can do better than this. You need to go to university like the other guys did. And finally, they made sense to me. Finally, they chipped away through this thick skull of mine, and I went to university, and I used boxing as a method of paying my way through university.
What did you study at uni?
Sports science.
Yeah, okay.
That was the obvious thing for somebody in my position to do. My coaching career had taken off and had gone very well, and I was already the national coach. But then what happened was...
National coach for where?
Pole vault.
Okay.
For the UK.
Okay,
but I'd reached a sticking point. I was doing very well at coaching. I did my coaching qualifications very young, and I kind of reached a sticking point. And then when I reached that sticking point, another colleague coach had said to me, if you get yourself a sports science degree, you can go to the next level, but you've reached as high as you can go for now. And it was at that point that all those things collided. And in a Homer Simpson light-on moment, I decided to go to uni, and it was the best... No, it wasn't the best decision I ever made. Asking my wife to marry me was
that's
my
very
best
sensible,
decision
because she's probably watching or listening, and it's very wise. Good man. So you did all this. You did the sports degree. How did you get into setting up Boxercise? What was the transition?
That was really unusual, because I get accused of having some kind of magical eureka moment. It wasn't that at all. What happened was we had boxing club, and I was more experienced than the other boxers that were there, so I helped coach them, and finally we built a boxing team at Brunel Uni. The club still runs today, I'm very proud to say, though not with my involvement. And what happened was we had a lot of people that wanted to do the training but didn't want to get punched in the face, understandably so. So what happened was they would say, could we come and do some training with you after? So we just called it After Boxing Club. We didn't have a name for it. And we used that money, just 50p, £1, everybody coming in, to raise money to buy equipment for the boxing club, because we wanted because we didn't have any equipment at all. And one of the girls that came there, a young lady called Emma, she said, I like this boxing exercise. And then just in some bit of a light bulb moment again, we put the name together and it became Boxercise. That then what became a class that lots of people then came to. And then what happened after that was there were other people knew that this was popular, and they said, could you train me to do this? Now, I was working for UK Athletics as a coach educator already, and had been since I was 17. So I knew how to design that kind of program. I put it together with boxing knowledge and came up with something to educate coaches. And it's evolved a lot over the years. But in the early years, that's how it came to be.
Wow. And so now, where is it now? Because I know you've got a lot of...
54 countries now.
54 countries?
I know. I never thought it would ever grow to be anything
You must be rich.
as big as that. No.
You're rich?
No.
What?
I wish.
It's going to make you rich. So how many people then? Roughly? It must be thousands and thousands of people.
There are 30,000 plus that we've trained. There are, I think, about 7,000 or 8,000 currently teaching in the UK alone. A lot. And worldwide, there are 5 million people taking part in classes or personal training sessions involving boxercise. And in the UK alone, it's about 2.1 million.
Wow, that's incredible. From nothing to that.
I never thought that it would have such an effect. I've never really focused on... what I focus on is just delivering a really good quality product and training people to do their job as well as they can. We get a lot of people. We get fitness instructors, sports coaches, armed services personnel, and then people as well, veterans on resettlement coming through doing their training.
Well, you've brought some gloves, so you've got like gloves.
I have, yes.
So I've got pinky ones. Oh, this is nice.
Oh, they're pretty ones.
The pinky ones.
I brought the nice ones. In fact, this is not because you're a lady. This is purely because these were the gloves that I had in the cardboard box.
Is it?
At home. So there was no choice in colour at all.
Can't sort of do them up once they're on.
It's always a difficulty, isn't it? Where are we going to stand?
I don't know, just here then. Come on.
This'll do it.
I'll just punch you. What's the... As an instructor, I already know.
In high heels, that's it. Just set your range first.
Okay, so then...
There you go. So let's set with this hand, set with there. Right, let's have 1, 2. Boom, boom.
Oh,
so punch across, yeah. So this one to there and to there. That's it. Then reset. That's it. 1, 2. And then move the head twice. Always looks good if you move your head twice. Generally, there's 2 punches coming back in. So 1, 2, move twice. 1, 2, move the head twice. And it looks like she's avoiding shots there.
This is great.
I must admit, I feel much more at home with the pads on talking than just sitting and talking.
So talk to me then, so very briefly, because we're running out of time, where is it going now? Because I know you've done some very exciting thing that's coming on.
We have...
about 1 minute.
We're developing our online offering. We are also developing courses at andywakecoaching.com, which are aimed at not coaches, so that those
just
people
to help
just want
normal
to stay
people
fit.
to sort of develop
We're also working... no, so general fitness and getting... so that they can get their kids doing sports safely and effectively. So more for parents. Also working with Matt Fidesz Academies. And that's a very exciting development because I'm hoping that this will help because they've got a fantastic business-to-customer model. Help our boxercise instructors become financially successful and independent. So we're working with them on that. It's very exciting.
Well, Andy Wake, listen, it's such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me on. That went really quickly.
It did, didn't it? That's Andy Wake. He's the founder of Boxercise. Really good to talk to you. Thank you. He was my outside guest. A very incredible man, isn't he? Right. Well, listen, coming up, the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, should the Tories get rid of inheritance tax? It's sure to be a very fiery one, but first let's get some weather.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. July's relatively showery theme will be continuing over the next few days. Low pressure is gradually pushing its way off towards the north, so the winds will be easing, but for the time being, southern areas of Scotland down into north-east England could still see some blustery winds into the start of this evening. Some longer spells of rain for northern and western Scotland. Elsewhere, the thunderstorms and heavy showers we have seen will slowly be easing their way out, and underneath some of those clearer skies, temperatures will just drop down to around 11-12 degrees Celsius overnight. Might drop into single figures in some rural spots as well. It does, though, mean that we'll see a decent amount of sunshine first thing on Monday morning, but we will then see those scattered showers developing once again as we head throughout the day, particularly for eastern, central, southeastern areas of England. Some of those could be quite heavy in nature, maybe with some thunderstorms again and some hail possible also. But there will be some sunshine in between those scattered showers, and with winds lighter compared to the weekend, it will just feel that bit warmer. Temperatures ranging between 18 and 23 degrees Celsius. For Tuesday, though, we have to watch as our next low pressure centre is going to push its way in from the west. So turning quite damp first thing on Tuesday morning for Northern Ireland, and that rain will then steadily progress its way into parts of northern Wales, northern England and then Scotland later on. The far south-east generally staying drier, but there is still the chance of further showers as we do head towards the rest of the week. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
God, it's kind of cold for June, isn't it? What was July even? What was going on? This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Still to come, new laws from Italy's Conservative Prime Minister, which erases the names of gay mothers from their children's birth certificates. What do you think? We'll be discussing that. But next, we'll be continuing with the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, should the Tories just simply get rid of inheritance tax? Don't go anywhere.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point.
And action.
Sergeant, the big read, my superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
25 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Welcome. If you just tuned in, where have you been? It's time now, though, for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, should the Tories get rid of inheritance tax? Now, Number 10 is reportedly holding talks about making the scrapping of the inheritance tax part of its manifesto pledge in an attempt to win over voters in the next general election. Now, the rate of inheritance tax is currently at 40% for estates worth more than $325,000, which is charged on the portion that is above the threshold. But the estates of spouses and civil partners can pass on up to about £1 million without any inheritance tax liability. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should the Tories just simply get rid of it? I'm joined now by Belinda de Lucy, former Brexit Party MEP, political commentator Peter Spencer, former political correspondent, guest Elliot Keck, head of campaigns and the Taxpayers Alliance, and Angela Knight, former economic secretary to the Treasury of the UK. Wow. Right, I'm going to start with you, Elliot. So what do you think then? Talk to me about the inheritance tax threshold, $325,000 or $1 million if you've got a spouse. If we scrap it, is that a good thing or a bad thing? What's the deal if we scrap it? What do we lose?
It's absolutely a good thing. Inheritance tax is distortionary, unfair and immoral. It's distortionary because people make their economic decisions based on reducing their tax liability. Scrapping it is absolutely the right thing to do. It's unfair because it's a form of double taxation, and it's immoral because it's paid for by people who are suffering from bereavement almost by definition.
They're quite slow sometimes at dealing with probate as well, so sometimes you'll end up paying the interest on the tax because they haven't finished probate as well, which is somewhat out of order. Let's go to Angela Knight. She's the former economic secretary to the Treasury of the UK. Angela.
Well, let's just sort of rehearse the details for a moment, if I may, Nana, and then I'll jump in with what I see as the solution. Because, of course, you know, there isn't any inheritance tax if it's husband to wife or wife to husband. And as you rightly point out, that if you factor in your house and you leave it to, say, your children, then the threshold goes up from 325,000 to $1 million or thereabouts. So there's quite a lot in there in which you can find your ways round inheritance tax, and who it hits big time is a large number of people with houses that have gone up in price that sit particularly in the southeast, but also in other pockets around the country. And as you've also said earlier, people have paid tax on this money once, and now they're paying it a second time. To me, the reality of inheritance tax is it's the wrong tax, and it shouldn't be there. From a practical perspective, and if I was a politician still, which I'm not and haven't been for a long time, I would say if I try and remove inheritance tax in a series of moves, I'm far more likely to get to the right outcome than if I say I'm going to sweep it away. The sweeping it away, I'm going to be in a big political argument, tax breaks for the rich and all that sort of thing. But if I start off with indexing it, i.e. increase the threshold in line with inflation and do a few more things around the side, then I could get to a much better result early without having that political debate, which is always going to be a very difficult debate to have, and especially in times of economic difficulties.
Peter Spencer.
Well, it would suit me very nicely if they did abolish it, and it would suit my kids as well. But, good heavens, is that a load of pigs I can see floating around, flying around? Oh no, it's a dead cat. Look, the government is facing 3 by-elections in a few days' time, and Rishi Sunak has all but admitted he's going to lose them, thus making him the first Prime Minister to lose 3 by-elections in the same day since Harold Wilson. So here's a nice little bit of catnip. It very likely won't change the result of the by-elections, but it might just help to sort of to spare some of their blushes, because there's going to be some of those voters, traditional Tory voters, who might be wavering and think, hey, maybe these guys are not quite so bad after all, so maybe I won't vote Lib Dem or Labour, maybe I will vote for the Conservatives. But will this translate into policy? Will they actually dump £7 billion a year? In your dreams, guys.
Belinda de Lucy.
I think if the Conservatives committed to scrapping it now, before the next election, it might help them. But the idea that they've got the trust of the voters and they're going to put it in a pledge in the next manifesto, I just don't think there's a huge amount of trust and belief that that will actually turn into policy eventually. And the death tax is a repugnant policy. It's morally indefensible. Many countries don't even have it, like New Zealand, Australia, Norway, Sweden, Mexico, because it is so morally indefensible. And I do think the Conservatives are panicking a bit, obviously, and want to throw us some crumbs, but a sort of pledge in the next election isn't going to cut it. If they scrap it now, they'll put on their big boy pants and do something bold for once and get it done. I think that will be fair. And the UK does have a great sense of fair play. And the death tax is a horrific tax that hits people when they're grieving. It as been mentioned, double taxes. And I think it will be good if they do it now, but not if they just say they're going to pledge it in the next manifesto.
Listen, thank you for your thoughts, all of you. Belinda de Lucy, Peter Spencer, Elliot Keck, and also Angela Knight. Thank you so much for your thoughts. Thank you. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. On the way, a controversial move for the Italian Prime Minister regarding some same-sex parents. But next, we'll continue with our great British debate this hour. And I'm asking, should the Tories get rid of inheritance tax? But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Hi there, very good evening to you. It's 5:30 here in the GB newsroom. The Business Secretary, Kemi Badenoch, says Britain is now closer to having access to a market of 500 million people and a potential £12 trillion worth of global trade. The UK has become the first European country to formally join the Indo-Pacific bloc, which should remove barriers to doing business and make some everyday items cheaper. However, critics say the impact will be limited. Official estimates suggest it will add £1.8 billion worth a year to the UK economy after 10 years, which is less than 1% of GDP. Ms Badenoch has admitted, though, a free trade agreement with the US is now highly unlikely. The Home Secretary's published a letter to Sir Keir Starmer alleging a Labour staff member met with Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion activists in private meetings. Suella Braverman claimed internal memos from Just Stop Oil showed MP Jess Morden met the environmental groups to sell them on how Labour is still driven by the environment. The Home Secretary called for the sacking of Miss Morden. Just Stop Oil, though, responded saying Suella Braverman is inventing stories to distract from the truth. Novak Djokovic is really up against it now in his battle against Carlos Alcaraz. Djokovic hoping to win a record-equalling men's 8th title at Wimbledon. He took the first set, Djokovic, 6-1, but he's lost the next two, 7-6, 6-1. Alcaraz now leading by 2-1. It is 1-1 in the third. So Djokovic hoping to equal Roger Federer's men's singles title record. Meanwhile, 17-year-old Henry Searle has become the first Briton to win the Wimbledon boys singles title since 1962, beating Yaroslav Demin 6-4, 6-4. We'll keep you up to date with what's happening at Wimbledon and more on all of our other stories on our website, gbnews.com. Now it's back to Nana.
Coming up, Chris Wilde talks about his campaign to help children in care, and Danny Kelly remembers a football phone-in pioneer. But next, we'll be continuing our great British debate this hour. Should the Tories get rid of inheritance tax?
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
37 minutes after 5 o'clock, it's fast approaching. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. Don't forget as well, you can stream the show live on YouTube. It's time now for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, should the Tories get rid of inheritance tax? Number 10 is reportedly holding talks about making the scrapping of inheritance tax part of its manifesto pledge in an attempt to win over voters in the general election. Now, the rate of inheritance tax is currently 40% for estates worth more than £325,000, which is charged on the portion that is above the threshold. But estates of spouses and civil partners can pass on £1 million without any inheritance tax liability at all. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should the Tories simply scrap the tax altogether? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by Danny Kelly and also Chris Wilde. Chris Wilde, what do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting, hasn't it? It's divided the communities, it's divided the nation. I've heard it on the radio. Politically, everybody's talking about this right now. Where do I stand on this? It's a good question, is that I think it shouldn't be scrapped. And the reason I think it shouldn't be scrapped is, as I heard... It shouldn't. And for reasons being... That's a lot of money to lose, and a lot of that money goes back into society. We're not an independent, we are a society. We rely on that money to build houses, and it goes back into the system. So for me, we should keep it.
But bear in mind that the people who are paying for it are usually those who aren't savvy enough and know the rules. So the people who've got loads of money sort of circumnavigate it. So it's not...
And I also think it's a dog whistle for the Tory party, just to kind of get votes. And the argument is, it does favour the rich, it doesn't favour the poor. And I just think, you know, it's a complicated thing to talk about inheritance tax. It really is. And it's, I think, for me, 40% is a lot of money to lose. Where are we going to find that money?
But you've been taxed twice, though. You've already paid for the thing you've been taxed for, and now you're dead, and they're going to take it from you again.
But that's life. Tell me where are we going to get that money from? It's life, it's death.
Death.
But I fear they'll take it from other places, and I don't want them to take it from education. I don't want to take it from the care sector. It's there, it's a lot of money, it's good use, we should keep it.
Take it from your kids. Danny?
Yeah. 325 grand nowadays, even
in working class areas, 325 grand doesn't get you much of a house.
No,
you know,
it doesn't.
the houses have just spiked in price.
Not even in
Well,
Yorkshire.
the Labour Party would bring it down to about 120.
Is that, yeah, I read that,
was
125 grand.
So that was
like
one of the suggestions. I don't know whether it's actually a pledge, but it was on the suggestions in the manifesto, which would bring everybody into it pretty much.
I think it's a shame that Rishi Sunak has floated this just ahead of some by-elections. It's a shame that you're in such a weakened position that you have to give something like this. For example, Boris Johnson, whether you love or hate him, 3 or 4 years ago, he wouldn't have had to have offered this, red meat, if you like, to floating voters or Conservatives. So it's a shame that the Tory party is so weak at the moment.
But why is everything red meat when an opportunity comes along that could be of benefit? Because ultimately, look, they've got an election coming up within a year or a year and a half max.
Yeah.
So
Well, I'll explain.
anything will be red meat.
A strong party wouldn't have had to have done it. That's my point. A weakened party who is on their knees are desperate for votes, so they've had to throw something else. Where's that $7 billion? How's that going to be recovered elsewhere?
Absolutely.
It's going to have to be recovered elsewhere. One thing that no one's...
Well, what about those big companies that make loads and loads of money, especially the ones through the pandemic? They could take some big taxes off them and get rid of this inheritance tax altogether.
Well, you could do. Now, that would be a tactic and a vote winner for socialists all around the United Kingdom, but we don't live in a socialist country.
Well,
we
I think we do, actually, the way they're behaving, but anyway.
So, one thing that no one's mentioned anyway, I thought I'd just throw in. If someone is left £325,000, one reason that this tax exists is that you are less likely to go out and actually work and earn tax for the government. You are less likely, if you're given £500,000, are you going to continue to do 50 hours a week?
No, I'm going to take 3 years off work.
Of course you are, and the government is going to be denied 3 years...
3 years and half a million.
No, but that's the point. All of a sudden, you become less of a tax contributor. You've just been given £500,000 because you've lost your mum and dad or whatever, which is a terrible thing. I don't like the term death tax.
Yeah, but they paid
That's
for
too
it.
emotive. No, yes, but all of a sudden, someone is benefiting from a massive estate, maybe 600 or 700 grand, and they are less likely to go to work to generate tax for the government.
I was going to say that a death tax...
No one's ever said that.
The death tax is actually a mortgage.
I'm glad you have said that. You really brought that to surface.
It's true, though, isn't it?
Yeah, of course.
Listen, Chris, you're not here to agree with him.
No, look, we disagree.
He's not coming back.
I'm a capitalist. I'm a capitalist. Red-blooded capitalist, and he's not. But you are... I'm just thinking about it from the government's perspective. If I was the government, I would want to make sure you continue to work, because I want your 40% tax.
Well, that's all very well, but then being the general public and the person that you are, having already paid the tax and already paying tax for the assets that you have, you're quite comfortable with the fact that you don't think they should scrap it? I think they should absolutely scrap it, and in decent countries like New Zealand and places like that, they've scrapped it because it doesn't really bring in the money that they're expecting it to bring in.
Do you know how many people are in New Zealand? There's about 60.
Exactly. You can't use that as a comparison.
There's a million sheep and about 60 people.
That's not the only country. There are other countries as well. So it's not just them.
All right.
So it's not just them. That's an example.
Great Britain, not New Zealand.
Exactly.
OK, so in your view, then the government should keep the inheritance tax. You're happy with it at the threshold at 325,000?
It's a lot of dough, isn't it?
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of dough. How much more dough do you want than 325?
And what about, in terms of, because a lot of the stuff they do, so for example, probate, it takes them ages to do probate. It should only take a short time. But if you haven't paid the tax of the inheritance tax within the first 6 months, I think it is, then they start charging you the interest for the money that you would have got had you sold that asset. So if the asset goes up in value, then the tax that you'll pay will be even more when the asset is eventually get your money for probate. So the whole thing is a mess.
The government needs taxation in order to exist.
Of course it does.
But
And to grow. And the Labour Party don't abolish this at all. Some of them are in agreement with this.
You're in agreement. So if they lower it to £125,000, you'd be happy with that?
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't.
Oh, hang on. Hang on. Your answer off. He's not happy with that. Well, let's see
I'm not happy with 3.25.
Maybe the viewers have got something more sensible to say than you two. The show's nothing without their chance. Welcome them on. Their opportunity to say what they feel about the topics we're discussing. I've got 3 of you. Let's start with Julie Ford there in Bedford. Julie Ford, who also doubles up as a property expert as well. Julie, what do you make of these people? This inheritance tax, surely it's awful.
For me, Nana, to be perfectly honest with you, it's one of those taxes that, again, is not fit for society today. It was great when it was first brought in because the whole idea of it was so that the wealthy and the rich didn't compound their wealth just by inheriting property and not being able to put that back into society. So at the time, it was a great idea and it worked. Now in society today, it's not fit for purpose. I don't think it should be abolished altogether, but I I certainly think it needs to be revisited and readjusted, because otherwise, where are we going to get that £8 billion income? We're going to have to try and find it somewhere else, and that's the important bit for me.
Right, thank you for that. Sensible words. So let's go to Armin Brecht, who's a new GB voice. He's there in Croydon. Armin.
Hi, Nana. I think we should scrap the inheritance tax. I think it's fair for the families, and I think families have worked hard for what they've got, and so why shouldn't families just keep their wealth? I mean,
Put it back on him. Put it back on him. Sorry, carry on, Armin.
Sorry, could you hear me?
Yeah, we could hear you, Armin. Carry on.
Sorry, could you hear me?
Yeah, carry on. You were saying.
Yeah. No. I think it's fair that the families should keep their wealth. Why should they have it taken away? We've all worked hard for what we've got. Why should we have it taken away? Also, I think the other one is the stamp duty, which is like the insult tax. The stamp duty is this insult tax where people want to better themselves. Well, why should they have to pay more tax to buy a house?
I agree with you. David Balm. Let's go over to Watford and have a chat with David Balm.
Hi, Nana. Hi, Tim. I agree partially that we do need some form of taxation, but raise the threshold to something like £2 million for those who can actually afford it. For the majority of people, when you buy your house, you pay stamp duty on it. You're paying tax already on everything you buy. And then when you die, your family or whoever you decide to leave your property to have to pay tax on it again. So it's like double bubble for the government. So I think if you can raise the threshold to something like 2 million, which takes out a vast majority of people's houses, it would be a vote winner for most, because no one will reject to say better park, whatever, the big homes, where the stately homes where they're worth millions, paying their share on those.
Well, I'm with you. These are sensible people, unlike the two to my left or right or whatever. Thank you very much to Julie there in Bedford, Armin in Croydon and David in Watford. Brilliant voices. All right, well, what do you think as well? Please send in those messages to us. gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews. Right, on to another story that caught my eye. Now, today, Italy is to erase the names of lesbian mothers from their child's birth certificate in a crackdown against same-sex parenting and surrogacy. And now the move is led by Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, who disapproves of the LGBT plus couples raising children together. She says the country's laws do not allow children to have two mothers. So basically, they take one of the mothers off the birth certificate. Same-sex unions were legalised in Italy in 2016, granting many rights to married couples, but stopped short of permitting marriage and adoption amid fierce opposition from the Catholic Church. So let's see what my panel make of that. Joining me, Danny Kelly and also Chris Wilde. Danny Kelly.
Yes. OK, what do I think of that? Look, I think I'm just a normal sort of bloke, and I think normal blokes do their hearts skip a beat with joy when they see a same-sex couple with a kid? I don't think they do. I'm a bit of a traditionalist, but what they're doing in Italy is they are removing the name of, not the biological mum, but the actual, the other mum, OK? Yeah. So which I think is a callous thing to do. I think it's callous. I think people who are in same-sex relationships, if they want a child, then they should be able to have a child. It's not like they're taking a child from somebody else. This child wouldn't be on the planet if it wasn't for them.
But what would you say to the argument that the birth certificate demonstrates the mother and the father, so the two contributors to this child who've made this child? So that's in that respect. So let's take away the whole the same-sex element of it, but take a look at the biological aspect of it. Because if you were to look at it in the most plainest terms,
well, I'm looking at it in terms even plainer, that there is a child on this earth that wouldn't have been there had it not been for those two women in this case.
Absolutely,
and that's how I look at it.
Chris?
Yeah, and I find it quite repugnant reading this, if I'm honest with you. I work within the care sector, and you can't believe the amount of young people who go to same-sex families, to women, men, and to hear stuff like this, it's just like it's going back into the archaic days. It's Dickensian. It's disgusting.
But I don't know what I think about that. I don't really have an opinion on it either way. But to me, ultimately, I'm a very biology-based person. So if I want the people who made that child on the certificate for the sake of the child, for the child to know who those people are. That's just the biological side of it. But I get the emotional side that these two people are the parents, irrespective of whether they're men or women or whatever. So, but for me, it's the biological aspect. That's why I would have both the male and female who made that child there.
But don't forget...
But that's the only reason.
Don't forget, we're talking about Italy, which is an incredibly, compared to the UK, incredibly religious country. And this is a conflict between religion and same-sex families, OK? And we can't dismiss religion and people's beliefs over modern 21st century liberal views. They still have a right of an opinion, but I think it's callous to remove the non-biological mum from the birth certificate.
Absolutely, Dan. I just second that as well. Sometimes them parents don't deserve that child. They don't deserve to be on that birth certificate. Them two are going to give that child a loving home, and then they are the parents. They deserve to be on the birth certificate.
I'm with you on that. Ultimately, that is the way it is, isn't it? For the people who care for their child, they should be on the birth certificate. Right now, though, it's time for Supplement Sunday, where me and my panel discuss some of the news stories that caught their eye. So let's see. I'm joined by author and campaigner Chris Wilde and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Let's go. Start with Danny then. Danny, your supplement's about passing of the West Midlands legend Tony Butler. Very sad.
Yeah, I may not have mentioned on this show before, but I'm ex-BBC. Spent 15, 16
taking him all this time to say it on air.
and when local radio actually mattered to communities, local radio typically now doesn't matter to communities, but in the heyday of the 90s, the 80s and the 2000s, there was a fella called Tony Butler who, unless you're from the West Midlands, you won't even know the name, but he pioneered the football phone-in. So when you listen to TalkSport or when you listen to Radio 5 Live, the phone-in was pioneered by a fella called Tony Butler, who was a real character. He died at the age of 88, which is a decent age, and I think that I would like to just bring his name to the nation because it was his idea to have people phoning in, moaning about football.
Ah, that's good. So bless his heart. God rest his soul, the fabulous Tony Butler. Right, Chris Wilde.
Yes, I just want to bring to your attention, so the Independent Care Review for England was published in January this year. I was a part of that review. We wanted to make care experience a protected characteristic because we thought young people in care, they're the only people in our society who have the corporate parent as a parent, and when they get to 18, they fall off the care cliff. There's no support whatsoever. And a campaign was started by a great man called Terry Galloway, and the government kind of opposed this, but what he's done is he's going around every council all over the country, getting the council to pass motion to make care experience a protected characteristic. So what that does, it gives the most vulnerable people in our society a voice. It stops them going into jail. It prevents them being placed into these dilapidated houses in deprived areas. It absolutely gives them a voice. It gives them more opportunities to thrive, and that's what it's all about. And that's my story of today, and it's really heartfelt. And look out for this because it will happen, and hopefully government will make it a legislation.
So I don't fully get what you mean.
That's a great speech.
I don't know what he's talking about. I said, what are you talking about? What is this man talking about?
So, care experience. So people in the care sector.
What about people thinking the same thing?
Yeah, they face all kinds of discrimination. They face all kinds of discrimination. They leave care, and what they do basically, they fall off the care cliff. They can't get houses because when they go and try and get a house, and the landlord says, "Oh, you're in care." No, we don't want people from the care sector.
So they have to make that.
It's about discrimination.
Okay, right.
She's still none the way.
She's still no.
Right. Well, finally, only because I was thinking, what about me? It's mine. It's me. No. So finally, on to my supplement. This is about private schools and Sir Keir Starmer's tax plan to strip the independent schools of their charitable status, which would cost them exemptions for corporation tax and VAT. Private school leaders have warned that the scrapping of the charitable status will push up fees for parents. But Chris, what do you think of this? Do you think this is a wise? To me, it's a Robin Hood move. But what do you think? Briefly, you've got about 20 seconds.
20 seconds. No, I think it's really good. I think what it says, what it says.
So put the VAT, remove the charitable status from these schools and make them pay more. The parents pay more.
Listen, quickly. So removing charitable status, what it's going to do is they're going to up the cost. So it's going to force more kids into state schools. State schools are already overwhelmed. But I get the Labour thing on this. It's a levelling up policy where 70% levelling down. But 70% of people who go to private school are getting better grades than those from lower schools.
So how about they improve the state school system?
But that's what they should do.
Well, exactly. Instead of that,
it's difficult, isn't it? Because predominantly kids who go to state schools come from poorer families, and unfortunately, statistically proven that if you come from a poorer part of town, you're less likely to succeed. Why are you less likely to succeed? Maybe there are too many distractions, both in the classroom and outside of the classroom. Yeah. It's just fact of life.
Yeah, OK, so you haven't even said anything about the thing itself, though. So the private schools, then, do you think...
I think you're right.
I am right. That's all I need to hear, really.
Remove
I
the
did
charitable status.
No, I don't think you should remove the charitable status at all, because those that are private schools aren't just these wonderful schools. They also cater for children with needs, special needs, which I think are important for society. But on today's show, we've been asking, should Prince George serve in the armed forces? According to the Twitter poll, 66% of you say yes, 34% of you say no. Thank you so much to my panel, author and campaigner Chris Barr.
Thank you. Thank you.
You were wild. Chris Barr,
Yes.
and Danny Kelly, thank you to you as well.
Thank you very much.
And thank you to you at home for your company. I'll see you next week, same time, same place, 3 o'clock.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. July's relatively showery theme will be continuing over the next few days. Low pressure is gradually pushing its way off towards the north, so the winds will be easing, but for the time being, southern areas of Scotland down into north-east England could still see some blustery winds into the start of this evening. Some longer spells of rain for northern and western Scotland. Elsewhere, the thunderstorms and heavy showers we have seen will slowly be easing their way out, and underneath some of those clearer skies, temperatures will just drop down to around 11, 12 degrees Celsius overnight. Might drop into single figures in some rural spots as well. It does though mean that we'll see a decent amount of sunshine first thing on Monday morning, but we will then see those scattered showers developing once again as we head throughout the day. Particularly for eastern, central, southeastern areas of England, some of those could be quite heavy in nature, maybe with some thunderstorms again and some hail possible also. But there will be some sunshine in between those scattered showers, and with winds lighter compared to the weekend, it will just feel that bit warmer. Temperatures ranging between 18 and 23 degrees Celsius. For Tuesday, though, we have to watch as our next low pressure centre is going to push its way in from the west. So turning quite damp first thing on Tuesday morning for Northern Ireland, and that rain will then steadily progress its way into parts of northern Wales, northern England and then Scotland later on. The far south-east generally staying drier, but there is still the chance of further showers as we do head towards the rest of the week. Bye-bye.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, in My Big Opinion, after signing $1 trillion trade deal, Brexit once again proves the naysayers wrong. In My Take It 10, amid the BBC sex scandal, Hugh Edwards is not the victim. This story isn't going away, not on my watch. Plus Anne Widdecombe, Edwina Currie, my top pundits, the papers, and live in the studio, iconic former Cabinet Minister Dr. Liam Fox. Plus, are Labour the political wing of Just Stop Oil? It's going to be an explosive show.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
and action.
Sergeant the Big Green, my superstar panel that are already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with